Welcome, everyone. I now call the July 9th, 2024 regular City Council meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this point, we'll take a moment to take roll call of the council members by position number. Please say here when the city clerk calls your name. City clerk?
Thank you. Councilmember Zorns?
Here.
Mayor Thompson?
Here.
Councilmember Alders?
Here.
Councilmember Kurd?
Here.
Councilmember Menke?
Here.
Councilmember Dodd?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Here.
All present. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we continue with the rest of the agenda, I'd like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. For remote meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently and mute your microphone when not speaking. First up is meeting agenda approval. Are there any changes to the meeting agenda? Councilmember Zorns?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. I appreciate it when you use the light. It makes it easier for me. Next up is public engagement opportunities. We have our first Music in the Park starting on Friday, July 12th from 6 to 9 p.m. at the park at Bothell Landing. You can join us for the first summer concert of the season. This free event will feature food trucks, yard games, and musical acts Jaden Luke and the West Coast Feud. We have the Bloodworks Northwest Blood Drive, July 17th through 18th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. in Bothell Council Chambers. You can donate at City Hall's mobile blood bank and give the gift of life. Sign up for an appointment. And we have the Makers on Main Street, Friday, July 19th from 6 to 9 p.m. Main Street and 101st Avenue Northeast, right out here. An outdoor night market where you can gather, shop, dine, and listen to live music from Kelly Bradley Band and Brian James. All right, we have proclamations. We have one proclamation tonight for Disability Pride Month. Whereas Disability Pride Month is celebrated every July to commemorate the Americans with Disabilities Act, landmark legislation signed July 26, 1990 to prohibit discrimination against individuals with disabilities in public life and provided the foundation for disability rights as we know them today. And whereas Disability Pride Month offers an opportunity to celebrate the diverse identities of people with disabilities. And whereas people with disabilities fought for civil rights for themselves and others for decades and continue to advocate for equal access on a daily basis. And whereas people with disabilities deserve equitable treatment in places of work and education, and to include everyone in every other part of our community where access is provided who needs it. And whereas people with disabilities make enormous contributions to the city of Bothell's economy, culture, and civic life. And whereas many organizations in the city of Bothell support and celebrate people with disabilities, including the Alyssa Burnett Center, Cascadia College, Kindering, and more. And whereas the city of Bothell is committed to working in partnership with these organizations and others to ensure that people with disabilities are welcomed and celebrated in Bothell. Now, therefore, I, Mason Thompson, Mayor of the City of Bothell, do hereby proclaim July 2024 as Disability Pride Month in the City of Bothell to celebrate all that our community members with disabilities contribute to our vibrant city and reaffirm our commitment to working toward a more equitable and accessible society. And I believe we have Brian Foth and some other community members here to accept.
Hi, everyone.
This is your copy. Okay. Thanks for coming out.
My name is Brian Foth, and I'm honored to represent Cascadia College as the City of Bothell recognizes Disability Pride Month. Cascadia College shares the City of Bothell's commitment to build an inclusive environment for our community, especially for individuals with disabilities. Disability Pride Month gives us an opportunity to recognize the monumental passage of the ADA and other various accomplishments that came before and afterwards after the ADA. We also acknowledge the daily efforts that are required for individuals with disabilities to remove barriers. When barriers block access, it can create a ripple effect through an individual's life. It can affect access to education, basic needs, independent living, and so much more. This is why it is critical for institutions to recognize these inequities in our effort to build an inclusive environment. Disability Pride also creates space to do what we should be doing every day, including disability in the conversation. 1 out of 4 Americans have some type of disability, but far too often individuals with disability are left out of the conversation by the existing structures. I'd like to thank Gabby Kuna and the city of Bothell for not leaving disability out of the conversation and building time for this important proclamation to recognize Disability Pride. Thank you all.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us. Thank you for that round of applause, Ayrton. I appreciate that. My name is James Defty. I'm joined by my wife, Elaine, my oldest son, Ayrton, and my younger son, Spencer. And we're parents of children who have disabilities and developmental delays. And we're honored to be here today to express our thanks and gratitude for the city recognizing July Disability Month and people with disabilities as a whole. This is a topic that's near and dear to us, and is something that we experience every day. Around the time Ayrton was 18 months was when we first realized that the way he was developing was different than some of the other kids, and it's because of organizations like Kindering that our children have had opportunities to grow and develop. And Kindering has also just provided a wonderful environment for us to be able to seek additional services as well. And so we're very thankful for the work that nonprofits like Kindering does, and just for access to education. The North Shore School District and the City of Bothell do a fantastic job, so we're appreciative of that. I think for us as parents, it's interesting because it's somewhat isolating. Our children don't always play like other kids. Other parents, even though they may have empathy and care, they don't live and experience life and how their children grow the way we do. And so, we just want other people to take a moment to pause and reflect about what they have and to be recognized. Even when you're in, I'm sure some of you heard the colorful sound effects as Mason there was reading off some things, and just being in grocery stores, and it makes people uncomfortable. And so just taking a moment to recognize individuals, to say hi to them, to ask them their name, to not treat them any differently, it means the world to us, and it makes us feel welcome. And that our children aren't, an annoyance or a bother to other people. Because I think, as someone who's more neurotypical, you're always trying to create this environment where other people aren't impacted and try and be courteous. So, by recognizing the importance of July Disability Pride Month as a city, you all are doing a wonderful job at promoting change and acceptance in the culture. And you're sending a message to families like us, as well as families of neurotypical children, that as a society, we should all be committed to making this a more acceptable, more accepting and open place. And so thank you, Mayor Thompson. Thank you, City Council, for the opportunity to come and speak to you all today. And we live here in Bothell, so we look forward to seeing you all around town. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And thanks for coming out. Y'all are welcome here anytime, sound effects or no. We're good. All right.
Mayor, can I speak to the proclamation
Please.
for a moment? Thank you. I think we don't often as council get an opportunity to say when we're proud of ourselves, which sounds strange, but since we're up here all the time. But I know that I'm not the only one on council who identifies as having a disability of some kind. But I think it's important to recognize when you have representatives who are of a particular population, we can own that and we can speak to it as well. And so, my disabilities may be physical and based in, a lifetime of experience, but I'm also the parent of kids with developmental disabilities as well. I have 3 children who are on the autism spectrum. And so when I am up here and when I'm talking about equity and inclusion, I am talking about my own family and just the importance of what we do up here and how we speak to the vision of the community that we are trying to build. I do believe that every member of our community is a beloved member of our community, and that the attitudes that we can have towards one another is one of love and welcome. And I appreciate when my kids are treated that way, and I work in my role here to ensure that others are treated that way as well. So thanks for being here, thanks for speaking, and thank you for the time, Mayor.
Not a problem at all. Anytime we get to own our neurodiversity in front of the public, I feel like that's probably a really good thing for the neurodiverse kids in the community. All right, we're going to move on to public comment. The city has accepted public comment in writing as well as accepted sign-up sheets for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. Written comments submitted to the city clerk no later than 3 p.m. today were forwarded to all city council members and are part of the record. When the clerk calls your name, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Please note that council will receive your input, but upon the advice of our city attorney, we do not engage in discussion of these topics. Staff will make note of items requiring follow-up. City clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. We received several written comments, so I'm going to go through those first. Bill Fargo wrote in regarding Disability Pride Month proclamation. Kathy Sharp wrote in regarding staff and council appreciation. She also wrote regarding support for manufactured home renters. Mark Swanson wrote regarding BOPOP member recusal and regarding Carrie Westerbeck recusal. We do have 3 people signed up to speak. And before I call on them, I would like to say that public comments shall be limited to the topics concerning current, future, or requested city projects, actions, programs, plans, and regulations. Comments not pertaining to these subject matters are not germane and may result in the speaker's comments being suspended. When your 3 minutes starts, the light at the dais will turn green. At 1 minute left, it will start blinking, and at 30 seconds left, it will turn yellow. The first person I have signed up is Kathy Sharp.
Before this starts timing, I have 2 very distinct comments. Do I take 3 minutes for both, or am I limited to 3 minutes for both of them?
Just the 3 minutes for both.
Okay. Then I'm going to start with the resolution to support local emergency transition funding for manufactured home tenants and legislative passage of statewide rent stabilization policies. This resolution came from the 1st Legislative District Democrats and was passed with great enthusiasm. Whereas tenants who live in and own manufactured homes within manufactured home communities and rent the land under their homes are being squeezed by high rent increases and fees beyond many tenants' ability to pay. And whereas many of these tenants are seniors, those with disabilities, and veterans on fixed incomes who only receive an annual COLA increase of 2 to 3%, as well as other low-income wage earners. And whereas the 2024 Washington State Legislature in the House passed a bill to support fair rent stabilization and sufficient rent fee increase notifications for tenants in manufactured home communities, but the Senate did not vote on the bill. And whereas property rents and fees for manufactured home communities are escalating rapidly between 20 to 60%, beyond the COLA increases of renters on fixed or nominally increasing income, thereby forcing tenants to be threatened with eviction and homelessness and forfeiting the manufactured homes they own. And whereas without city or county intervention, these rent and fee increases will start going into effect as early as last month, forcing the most vulnerable and low-income people out of these affordable homes they own and into homelessness. Therefore, be it resolved that First Legislative District Democrats urges the Snohomish County and King County Councils and First District City Councils with manufactured home communities to find solutions to protect tenants suddenly priced out of their property rents and facing near-term evictions. Solutions may include providing immediate emergency short-term funding to qualifying manufactured home tenants. I'm going to stop with the resolution at that point so I can mention the next one. I know you have these in your packets. The second one, I'm sorry to be limited on, is a resolution of appreciation to city council members and city staff. Whereas a representative government of, by, and for the people is foundational to democracy and our constitutional government, and whereas the work of city council members and city staff is challenging and complex, often requiring lengthy discussions with constituents and each other, during which council members and staff work to listen calmly, respectfully, and patiently to all voices, and whereas forward-looking vision. Anyway, we thank you for the work that you've done. I hope you will read and sincerely accept, both for staff and council, our appreciation for the work that you do.
Thank you, Ms. Sharp. And it will be included as part of the record, so we appreciate it. Next up, I have Alyssa Campbell.
It's on. Hi, everybody. My name's Alyssa Campbell. I'm the Government and Community Relations Manager at Recology King County. Thank you for having me here, and thank you for having us all here. You might have noticed on the agenda today, there's the approval for the solid waste contract with Recology. We're very excited to be here and highlight the contract that's been created with staff. But past that, we've been really proud to serve the city for the past decade. And in recognition of this, I want to highlight some of the community outreach that we've been working on this past year. And first of all, I just want to say happy belated 4th of July to everybody. We were there at the pancake feed and the parade, so it was another great year. You always have a really awesome turnout. I think more than 3,000 people again, so really great to see that. And then in this past year, we recurringly host Recology store workshops. So you have a Recology store in Bothell here that serves not just the city, but the surrounding area. It's a great resource. And so this past year, we've provided the opportunity for people to repair their scissors that they have at home, to learn how to mend their clothing. And then we also hosted a sustainable gift wrap workshop as well. And on August 3rd, so mark your calendars, we will have another scissor sharpening workshop. It's always very popular, so we'll be there all day, and you can bring multiple pairs of scissors, and we'll get those sharpened for you. And then in September of this year, we'll be looking forward to being a part of Sustainamania. So I believe this is the city's 3rd time hosting this awesome event, so we will be there. And there's plenty of other opportunities. We'll be in the city for working with businesses, trying to increase diversion and reduce contamination in the recycling and compost bins here in the city. So thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you this summer.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mark Swanson, and he's on his way. Can you hear me, Mr. Swanson?
I can, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Greetings, all. I'd like to speak to the Puget Sound Regional Council population projections of 1.8 million, which the Planning Commission and this City Council has taken as sacrosanct numbers. This projection, however, flies in the face of what has actually been going on in King and Snohomish County, which are growing at less than 1% a year. And in 2021, King County actually shrank. Now, I'm not the only one that finds flaw with this $1.8 million projection, which I must add immediately, we are not held to by law. We don't have to change our projections as a city based upon this 1.8 million projection, which is hopefully a little better than the CO2 projections of the IPCC. The IRS has come around and they put their 2 cents in. And I read this from the ClarkCountyToday.com website, which is reprinted from the Center Square, Washington. Washington State saw a net loss of 18,798 taxpayers and their families between calendar years 2021 and 2022, according to the Internal Revenue Service migration data released last week. That represents a loss of nearly $1.66 billion of taxable income, although Washington does not have a state income tax. The Evergreen State's net loss of taxpayers in that time period was the 9th worst in the nation. And here you guys, between the Planning Commission and the BOPOP members on the City Council, you've hijacked and flipped our comprehensive plan. You're not protecting our residences. You're not protecting current residents. You're taking tax money from them to feed into a vision of what you think the future community would be. I might add that 5 of the 7 city council members are BOPOP members, and they shouldn't be voting on any of this stuff because they're convicted urbanists. Well, that may be as well as it may. I at least expect you people to be ethical, moral, and not bully the current residents of Bothell for your utopic vision that's going to run our town out of character, wildlife, traffic freedom, mobility, community. And we haven't even started seeing
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Thank you for your comments. Your time is up. That's all I have, Mayor Thompson. However, if there's anybody else in the audience who wishes to speak, please step to the podium and you'll have 3 minutes. State your name. That's all I have.
Thank you, City Clerk. Next up, we have reports. We're going to kick it off with the City Manager report. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. And we do have 2 more substantial presentations tonight under reports of both a staff report as well as we'll be hearing from the chair of the Planning Commission. So I'll keep mine brief, but we've heard some reference to 4th of July. I suspect under the community reports and conversations of council, we might hear more, but just wanted to open up with echoing thanks to the Bothell community for coming out and celebrating with us on the 4th of July. It was our 114th year having a parade in Bothell, which is pretty spectacular, and it takes a lot of work to pull that off. And I was able to speak with many of the volunteers and our staff members along the parade route, and there's also so many staff members behind it in terms of planning. It takes months and months to get ready, and also with eyes in the sky, making sure everybody is safe and reunited with their family if they ever get separated. So really it was a wonderful day, a wonderful event, and I'm really thankful to the expertise and thought that our team here at the city puts into it, and it just keeps getting better and better on the planning front as the parade itself also grows. So thank you to all involved. With that, I am going to turn things over to our DEI coordinator, Gabby Kuno, who is going to give a brief update on on our DEI program and share a little bit more information. So with that, welcome, Gabby. Take it away.
Hi, y'all. Thank you, City Manager Stainer, for the introduction, as well as Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council for having me here tonight. I have the pleasure of serving as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coordinator for folks who don't know. And tonight I'm here to share a very brief update on the city's growing DEI program, as well as our progress on the 2023-2026 DEI roadmap. So just to be clear tonight, there's no action requested. This is for information only and a brief update. We'll go ahead and get started with a brief alignment about the council vision, how this program aligns with your 2040 council vision. We'll do a quick context and history, and then we'll give an update on the current progress of the roadmap as well as next steps for the program as we continue to grow. So, for the 2040 Council Vision and Priorities, diversity, equity, and inclusion is woven into each one of them, but we see it the most within the community of trust and respect, the joyful and healthy way of life, and then, of course, Bothell's beloved community. So throughout those, we see developing a phased plan to implement DEI efforts across the city, assessing opportunities to enhance cultural events and celebrations in our community, and then within Bothell's beloved community, using the King Center's principles of nonviolence to bring people together, enhance civil dialogue, and care for others. So a quick context and history. I joined the city as the first DEI coordinator last year in June 2023 with an immediate focus on implementing and finalizing the DEI roadmap and formalizing the diversity, equity, and inclusion program at the city of Bothell. In September of 2023, I came to council and shared that roadmap with you and the community. And a really important part of that was ensuring accountability and transparency so that we are sharing this vision that we have, not only with you all, but the community, so that we can hold ourselves to it. It's a promise that we have. And then since then, there's been ongoing implementation of the roadmap and the development of the DEI program. All right. So briefly, as I've touched on before, the diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging roadmap is both aspirational and operational. It must be proactive and responsive to our community needs as they continue to grow and change, but has to remain flexible. So it's value-based commitment to ourselves and our community, but it also must be specific, measurable, and realistic. So our DEI roadmap is broken into 5 different goal areas, each of which has action items associated with them that tells us how we're going to get to what we envision for our city, our council, and our community. You've all been provided with what I like to call a progress report that is color-coded. It shows you the action items that we have been able to complete. Some of those action items were things that went from not existing to suddenly existing, suddenly being with time and effort. And then some of them you'll also see have been briefly delayed based on staffing capacity. And I'm pleased to report that none of them were delayed indefinitely or completely on hold. But I'll go ahead and get started with each of our goal areas. So our first goal area is leadership, accountability, and organizational culture. This was really about formalizing processes and integrating DEI into our annual strategic work plans so that the city can foster an internal organizational culture which shapes how we deliver city services and ensuring that our city services can be accessed by all of our community members. Some of the really amazing, we have a long list here, but some of the things that I want to touch on are a complete re-envisioning of the internal dive-in team to ensure that that team has action items and goals related to your vision and our mission of the DEI program. And then building relationships with local, regional, and national partnerships is a huge part of creating an internal organizational culture that is aligned with our regional partners. So we meet pretty regularly with the Washington Governing for Racial Equity and Inclusion Group, as well as national organizations like GARE and Race Forward, as well as the King Center. So there are a ton of really great action items under this one that we've been able to support and continue to build an organizational culture. There are also less tangible ways that I've seen this show up. I have had the opportunity to work with every single one of our departments across the city on special projects that they're working on. I've seen a huge openness and an eagerness to involve equity in the day-to-day work of city staff members and a willingness of city staff to really come at these conversations that can also often be really vulnerable and intimidating with a huge willingness to learn and an open mind. I've had the opportunity to work at organizations across the country doing this work, and this is really one of the first organizations I've seen that approaches this kind of work with such a willingness and an openness, and it's really exciting to see. For our next goal area, this one touches on plans, policies, and budgets. A lot of the work done in this area focuses on the development of an equity impact worksheet, which is a tool used by city staff members in each of our departments to guide their day-to-day work and help them really think about how equity can be used to make decisions that might seem really straightforward on the surface, but are actually have huge impacts on our city and our community members who access our services. So something as simple as surface water or sidewalks, people on the day-to-day might not think that those have a huge equity impact, but they do, and our community members tell us that. And so this is really a tool that city staff can use to start those conversations and make them a little bit less intimidating. And we've seen it implemented in each of our departments in a really meaningful way, and so that's super exciting. I've also had the opportunity to jump into the budgeting process and meet with our budget coordinators to talk about what it means to look through our budget as a moral document and through an equity lens, and really think about how we prioritize our projects with regards to the budgeting process. Something that I have been really excited about to see at the city is a real understanding that using an equity lens is not something that you just immediately learn, but rather it's a skill. And having these conversations takes practice. And again, I've just seen a huge openness to being able to jump into the deep end and have those hard conversations and really hone those skills. And I've seen that within the budgeting process and the policy development process in a big way. Area 3 is about workplace, workforce, and training. And this one really focuses on our ability to build capacity to be a safe, welcoming, and equitable place to work by building robust recruitment processes. I've worked with HR to develop inclusive recruitment practices and interview questions that really prioritize our commitment to supporting a diverse workforce that reflects our community in a meaningful way. We've also had the opportunity with Dive In to host workshops, not only at City Hall, but also at the Bothell Operating Center. Just last month, we had an Understanding Juneteenth training that was offered to all city staff members, really focusing on the history of systemic racism within the United States. We had 91 city staff members that showed up to that. It was really exciting to see just how excited people were to learn about a historical event and how it shapes their day-to-day work. So that was really cool. We've also developed a comprehensive training program to create an organizational culture rooted in welcoming and belonging, which we will be offering the first session of that later this month. And that is the first session starts with the foundations of DEI training, but we'll continue to build on that as we see staff and what their needs are. And so we've seen a huge willingness to learn, again, related to this area, and a willingness for people to take parts of the equity impact worksheet and really understand how it applies to their workforce and their workplace. And so even though that is another goal area, we've seen it really implemented within our recruitment and our hiring practices. Our fourth area is about communications and engagement. So as you heard in June, the community engagement team here at the city has done some amazing work to develop a comprehensive community engagement strategy. I had the opportunity to be very heavily involved in that process and ensure that equity was woven throughout that. So within that communications strategy, we had things about having accessible public meetings, digital accessibility, how to use social media to reach hard-to-reach populations, as well as in-person engagement. And so the community engagement team has done a really great job ensuring that our engagement opportunities weave equity throughout, and rather than have it just siloed. And then, as you'll hear later today, we also have been exploring options for meaningfully engaging with our community through the advisory bodies opportunities. And our last goal area is about community partnership, well-being, and growth. As you can see, we've done a lot of work here. And this one really focuses on building partnerships with our community, giving people opportunities to learn about and meet their neighbors, and celebrating our diverse community. When I look at the work that I've been able to do in the last year and the opportunities that I've had here, this is some of the work that I'm most proud of and most excited about. We have had the opportunity to build connections with organizations like Cascadia College, UW Bothell, the North Shore School District, the Alyssa Burnett Center, Eastside Pride, PFLAG. And through these connections, we've really been able to invite community feedback and participation in city initiatives and events. And one of the ways that you can see this the most clear is through our proclamations process, which y'all had the opportunity to witness tonight. When I joined the city, I reached out to a community member to accept a proclamation not long after starting, and they asked me how community members were involved in writing the proclamation. And it was my third day. And I was like, I don't know, they're not. I don't know how this works. But through that, I was really prompted to think about what it meant to invite community members into that process. And now I can say that we've really been able to turn that into an avenue of community engagement. For a lot of the members that come to accept the proclamation, this might be the first time that they've ever been in city council chambers, and it's really such an amazing opportunity to have a structured way to bring them in, and not only bring them into what we do, but hope that we can take what we do to them so that they feel like they have empowerment over the proclamations process. I'm a really big believer in the idea of nothing about us without us, and I've tried to embody that in the proclamations process. And so I'm very proud of the work that's gone on there. As far as next steps go, we will have continued implementation of the roadmap. As you can see on the progress report, there are some of the little dot points that don't have color coded. It's because they don't start yet. It's because they're pretty long term, and we'll be starting work on those either later this year or early next year or going into 2026. But as far as things that we have outlined, we're currently on track for the vast majority of things. So we'll continue with implementation and give regular updates to both the executive leadership team, the city council, and maybe most importantly, the community. That's everything for me. If you have, no. As a reminder, this is information only, but if you have any feedback or questions, it will continue to guide the implementation process as we move forward.
Councilmember Alders.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Gabby, for being here, for all of your work in this area. It's really exciting to see this presentation come to us. And before I just throw out some questions for you, really appreciate the efforts that I've seen you make in partnering with organizations, especially, you showed a picture, but you didn't mention that we had our first Pride event in the park, and that was really led by you. And I'm just really grateful that we had that event, and I hope to see that we can do things like that in the future. And I am curious to learn more about the new makeup of the dive-in committee, and how the conversations with King Center are going. And then also to find out, have you heard of the Disability Pride flag? If you Google it, it's very pretty.
All right, I'm going to start with the last one.
Okay.
First. I have heard of the Disability Pride flag. I know that we have a process for flags here at the city, and so that's something that we'll keep in mind and take into consideration. If anybody else wants to talk more about that, feel free to, but I have seen it. Next one. Conversations with the King Center. We haven't had direct conversation with them, but they do have a ton of resources online, which we've used, especially around thinking about their principles of nonviolence and thinking about community building. I've seen that they have some workshops as well and conferences throughout the year, but I haven't seen the opportunities to directly engage with them as far as having conversation, but I have taken a lot of their resources that they provide online and found ways to incorporate them as we build out our program. We think about the way that we approach this work, especially around conflict, especially thinking about how we approach this work in training and workshops, and encouraging our staff members to have courageous conversations with each other in a nonviolent and a way guided by respect and mutual respect for each other. The last question, remind me.
It was.
Dive in. Yes, thank you. So the revamping or the reimagining of the dive in team actually started last year, pretty early in joining. I had a lot of conversations with them about what they envisioned for that team, what they were passionate about. And some of the things that we got from that was that they really wanted action items, like they wanted to be able to work on direct action around building an organizational culture and supporting the development of the DEI program. And so the current members of the dive-in team stayed on. We've brought in a couple new ones to ensure that we have representatives from each of the city departments as much as possible. And then we have, through conversation about structure and interest, developed 3 subcommittees. We have a learning subcommittee that functions in some way like a book club where they focus on different podcasts, articles, and then they go through our DEI educational resources webpage to find things that are timely and really break into some of that really nuanced topics. And they meet regularly to have discussions about race, class, disability, and how they see that intersect with their work. We also have an outreach committee that does tabling as well as develops a quarterly newsletter that goes out to all city staff, which functions as like an educational touch point for all of our city staff members. That also gets posted on our website, our DEI website, so that is available for staff. And then we also have a training committee. So the workshop that we had last month was actually organized and facilitated through our training committee, which contacts their departments and really gets a feel for what city staff members are excited to learn about, and then does the organizational work to make sure that that can be brought to the city and happen. And so they do a lot of work around that. The committees also collaborate quite a bit. So our book club often does book reviews for our outreach committee, and our outreach committee makes sure that they go and they know what's happening with training so that they can share the word on that. So there's a lot of collaboration there, as well as all member meetings where they have the opportunity to join in on the work that I do and ensure that they can get involved as much as they have capacity for. I hope that answered that question.
That was delightful. Thank you. It was definitely comprehensive in a fantastic way, so thank you. One thing that came to mind while you were speaking, because it really looks like you, and sounds like you're taking a very comprehensive approach, especially to engaging staff members, is just a reminder that when you look at the basic kind of foundation of public administration, which is cities are basically, they're administering a public entity, equity is one of the key pillars of that. And so economy, efficiency, effectiveness are all kind of balanced with equity. And when we prioritize equity in the city, we are really getting back to the basics of what it means to be a well-run government. And I realize I'm getting, kind of esoteric here in the sense of an academic in a sense, but I think it's really important to remember that ever since there has been a field of public administration, equity has been one of the pillars of that. And so when we see these equity efforts happening in the city, it really is rooted in a long time of research, academic pursuit, and best practices. So I think it's really important that we have this coordinator position here, that you are here serving this community, and that you have that kind of framework and mindset in your work. So thank you very much.
I just chuckled because you're like, I hope that answered your question. And I was thinking, that was such an amazing, thorough answer. It seemed like it was part of the presentation. Councilmember Zorns?
I'll try to be brief. Thank you, Gabby. On a personal level, I just love your heart and your enthusiasm that every time I see you, you're game on. So hope you get good rest at night. I did have a question in our agenda packet, the things that are put on hold. I think I'm going to earn the nickname Chicken Little because maybe it comes with raising 5 children and being a little protective of them. But when we have emergencies, the best way to handle the emergency is to be prepared and practiced ahead of time. So I was wondering if this is put on, what is the official, put on hold, not there, delayed is its official thing. So what's delaying it? And do you have kind of a broad, big picture, idea of what it looks like or is going to look like?
Oh, I think you're speaking to the emergency communications plans that are wrapped up in one of the objectives.
Yes, it's under plans, policies, and
And
budgets.
potentially the demographics.
It's under the goals of department and agency business plans, providing line of business, et cetera. It's the first block of information. And some of the things that have been checked off are formalized equity impact assessment tool, equity reviews, and then emergency communication plans are prioritized and updated.
Yeah, the emergency communications plans are vitally important. We have a set of standard communication and messaging plans, but I will tell you, they're not all in language access yet, and so we need to make those a little bit more sophisticated. So it's just taking a little bit more time to make sure that we have all the right limited English proficiency data and that we have the messaging that works for everyone in our community and not just proficient English speakers. So it takes a little bit of time to do that.
So the major hurdle is language and making sure that we...
I would say that's one of the biggest hurdles.
Okay.
And there's just a little bit of challenge with capacity and devoting time to that and updating it with all the new communications and technology tools. In the communications world, we did things a certain way, and it was primarily with website, and we have a lot of instructions in there about how we update phone lines, but we have to really bring those up to current technology, and so that's what we're doing. Just
Okay.
taking a little bit of time.
And emergencies can have different scenarios. So if something one avenue shuts down, where do people know ahead of time where they go for information somewhere else?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Councilmember Dodd?
Thank you. Councilmember Aldrich's pretty much covered it, but I just wanted to thank you. And one of the delights that really tells me about the work you're doing outside of the formal updates is that whenever we are with another group, whether it's a joint meeting with the school board or another city, everybody sings your praises and thanks you for the work you're doing. So just adding to that, it's clear that you're doing a great job, and we're very glad to have you here.
I hear those same comments all the time too, just for the record, so thank you. The one thing that you said tonight that really made my heart glad was when you talked about how the conversations go with staff all over the organization on this and how much everybody is interested in learning more and doing better. And that makes me incredibly happy because this is a departure from the way that we've done things for a long time, and that can be challenging. So just thanks to everybody on the executive leadership team for fostering a culture in which that can happen. So thanks, everyone. I think we're good.
All right. So next up, we do have a report tonight from boards and commissions, and our Deputy Director of Community Development, Christian Getz, is going to be coming up and introducing the topic, framing the topic, and then introducing our Chair of the Planning Commission. So with that, I'll turn it over to Christian.
I don't know.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I'm going to tee it up here for the Planning Commission Chair. I just want to provide a couple of brief comments about the comp plan work that we've been working through over the last year and a half. So this is maybe 3/4 of the way there. There's a lot of work left to do. But what we've done, the staff, the team of consultants have worked toward the draft comp plan at this point, taking into consideration all the comments from the community, from Planning Commission, from Council, through all of the study sessions, what we've received through comments and emails and engagement activities like the open houses we had back in May, that were responding to the draft plan, the draft EIS, where we could continue to grow those. On June 26th, the Planning Commission held a public hearing where we brought them the final sort of 4 alternatives for a preferred alternative to move forward with. They've built a recommendation which Kevin will go through. Planning Commission's provided just excellent guidance over the last year and a half. A lot of the time before I was here, it's been great to work with them and see that happen. Planning Commission recommendation marks the completion of this draft phase for them. It moves on to you. So we're going to be returning to you next week with a study session where we're going to go into the details of how we landed to where we are based on what the recommendation is and run through any questions that you've got so we can move into the fall with additional study sessions and get a little more focused on the preferred alternative on that final draft. Just want to thank the Planning Commission one more time for their consistently valid and thoughtful input. And with that, turn it over to Chair Kiernan.
Well, good evening, and thank you for having me here. We recently, as Deputy Director Gates indicated, we recently completed our public hearing on the Imagine Bothell plan, and it's been quite a process. I want to particularly thank the Community Development Department for their hard work on this and their responsiveness to the Commission's feedback. We threw a lot of stuff at them, and they reacted very well, absorbing it and incorporating it. I want to particularly note this was done in the face of some real staffing challenges. And I'm pretty sure there was a block of time where the entire planning effort of the city was Director Greenspan. And we continued to move forward in the midst of those challenges. I also want to note Deputy Director Gates has done a marvelous job hearing what we were saying. And sometimes there are a lot of voices, and we're able to synthesize them to make sense. So I think it's important to recognize those efforts, and I thank you guys for that. As indicated, we support a hybrid option. There were two options presented to us. One was called the neighborhood option, where the growth was distributed through the city. Another was called the centers option, where growth was concentrated in a few centers. And as we looked at that, we saw some advantages to both and also some concerns about each. We were concerned with the centers alternative that all the growth was in just a few places, and people who are looking for alternatives were in those places. They were there, and the rest of the city wasn't really affected by that. The neighborhood alternative, on the other hand, loses some of the benefits of the centers. Those centers enable development of efficient transit, efficient delivery of service. So we looked for a hybrid, and the staff brought us that. And I think it's still being, some of the details are still to come. This is a draft. There's work to be done. But we saw advantages to both, and we said, why not combine them? And that'll also mitigate the impact a little bit of each. As opposed to having a lot of impact in a few areas, it'll be distributed a little more. So we saw that as a real benefit. This hybrid will also provide some alternatives, some more diverse options for housing that center's alternative wouldn't, and either of them. So you got a little more diversity by combining these two. We thought that was really important. We did seriously discuss potential impacts, and we're confident the city will work with it. Growth will have impacts. We're not kidding ourselves. This is reality, but I think the city has demonstrated a commitment to address those impacts, and staff has done a good job identifying that. So we're confident that can be managed. I want to particularly note the Red Barn area, and in the neighborhoods alternative, Red Barn did not get developed as much. Yet that's an area that has a real transportation core. You've got bus rapid transit coming through there. You've got some real transportation opportunities. You've got retail there. So having growth in that area, I think, is important, and we really focused on that. Another thing we wanted to really note, and it speaks to the staff more than to the commission's work, we got some very positive feedback from the indigenous communities. They spoke very highly of how the city reached out to them, how sensitive the city has been to their concerns, and we urge the city to continue this outreach. An invitation was made for us to come down there and meet with them, and of course I, being the old bureaucrat, said, Public Meetings Act, we can't just dive in. But we would like to find a way to hear from them directly, and they invited you as well. I don't know if you've heard that directly. But we were really pleased to hear that. A community that has not been heard often through growth, recognizing that they were heard very well. So that was very, very good to hear. We also urge the city to leverage technology to share the plan's content and its impacts with citizens. And that reaches back to some of the comments that were made by the previous speaker about accessibility. You look at these big documents, they're not really accessible to everyone. The way we speak, and I'll include myself in that, you fall into you get into these subjects, and you can get into the jargon, and you can get into the process, and it makes perfect sense to us. but you need to reach out and communicate. And I want to recognize strong efforts have been made in that regard, but we wanted to bookmark, continue to work on that. So we really appreciate the opportunity to work together with staff and with you on the council on developing this Imagine Bothell comprehensive plan. We look forward to it coming to fruition and continuing to work with you. So thank you.
Councilmember Zorns?
Thank you, Chairman Kiernan, for your presentation. You're very practiced. I appreciate it. I'm going to try, I have lots of questions here, and I'm going to try to winnow them down to a couple.
Okay, I may look to staff if you get detailed.
Yeah, and as we get going into questions too, I do just want to remind council as well as that, as the deputy director mentioned, staff will be back next week for a staff presentation and conversation.
Right.
So it could be that some of the questions come back to you next week.
Well, one thing, I noticed that there was a mention about the fee simple manufactured home developments. And the city of Bothell has a history of being very protective of fee simple and rental, renting land for manufactured homes. And just looking at the description here of changing the fee simple ownership to residential medium, and a bullet point below that R72 would become residential medium, I wondered what happens to those fee simple lots. Could someone come in and aggregate some of those fee simple lots and put something in that's not a manufactured home? So I would love to have that question. Doesn't need to be answered now, but I would like to know what the protections are in place for that so that doesn't happen.
And I would look to staff for that. We on the commission share the interest in protecting those. And actually, a number of years ago, one of the earlier things I worked on with the commission was around those. So they are important housing alternatives that provide some affordability.
Right, and I didn't want an accidental whoopsie to sneak in and they end up being exposed to something we didn't intend to expose them to. And then, I'm trying to show you some mercy here. I'll be looking forward to more definitions and explanation on what those changes of terms are. And when we talk about North Creek, do you view it from the Seattle Times, Home Depot, all the way up into Snohomish County when we talk about North Creek? What are the when you talk about North Creek, what's the picture that you get?
You talking about the waterway?
I'm just, it's one of the areas that you have for existing commercial mixed-use areas, and North Creek was one of them.
I'd have to look at the plan. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
If it covers both King and Snohomish?
Yeah.
Okay.
We didn't delineate, even, particularly if you look at Red Barn, for instance, that spans both. And we did not, there are distinctions noted when you have housing goals in King and Snohomish, but as we looked at the plan, we looked across the boundaries. We didn't look at those as.
And you guys also end up having to talk about transportation too, as part of your, so as you have this conversation, I'm assuming you will be doing this, but we because of our geography, we have limited established roads for getting in and out of areas of Bothell, and as we build up our population, what's a reasonable expectations to find other ways of moving around, and at what point do we say we've hit critical mass? I don't think anyone knows that answer, but I hope that there is some noodling over that as you have that discussion.
There has been discussion about transportation, about levels of service, whether they should be per vehicle or per corridor, and I don't know if I want to jump ahead of staff on that, but there may be some redefining of levels of service in the future. We did a lot of work on the bike plan to provide other alternatives for mobility, but you're right. There are limited corridors that you can move people through. So that's a reality.
Right. I think that's it. I'll just save the rest of my questions for next week. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dodd?
Thank you. I really appreciate you coming to this meeting, and I just had a meeting last week, and all the work that the commission has done. Please pass on, I'm going to say our thanks, because I don't think it's a stretch to say that it's everyone's thanks on council for all the work. It is a great service that you do for $100 a month before tax. So it is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Well, I feel compelled to recognize that a number of members up there were on the commission for part of this process as well. So it's been a process that's been underway for quite some time. There's been a lot of work, and it's been very interesting. I think it's very important work. So I've been proud to be part of it.
And we've been proud that you've been a part of it. I just kind of want to echo some of the thanks, and I really appreciate the commission's goals and kind of the ways that you've explained kind of what we are trying to accomplish through this hybrid option, and I'm just looking forward to seeing kind of what some of those details look like. But thanks for coming tonight. We appreciate it. You.
All right.
Yeah. Sorry, the mayor spoke, and usually that means all the talking is done, but thank you for letting me in. I guess I'd like to ask, like, how is the Planning Commission, like, your feedback shaped by or informed by the council's vision document? Like, what has that been like for you as a planning commissioner having a vision document? Because I know that when I was on planning commission, we didn't necessarily have that kind of guidance from council. So, like, what is it like?
We do look to that. We also, I'd say at least as much, though, look to the community input we've seen. I think most of the commission has been to most of the public meetings, so we've been able to see how the vision's presented in those meetings and how the public reacts to that vision, which is equally important. So, yeah, it's been part of it, and it's informed what we've done. So thank you for that. It is helpful.
Well, and thanks for, just providing some feedback on it, right? Because, documents can just kind of go out and, languish in a binder somewhere. But when they're being used and applied, people experience, their own thoughts and reactions to that. And so I just appreciate you being able to share that. So thank you.
Well, and to perhaps amplify a little bit, a number of the commissioners have talked about how pleased we are to have a council that supports the kind of thinking we're doing. As much as, we're trying to implement what you have, we hear your vision, and we're pleased we're able to move it forward. So I think we're in sync there. So it's been very useful. Thank you.
Seems like kind of how it's supposed to work, so that makes me happy too. Thank you, Chair, for coming in tonight. We really appreciate having you here, and for your and the rest of the Planning Commission's service to Bothell.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next up is Council Committee Reports, Community Reports, and Conversations. Councilmember Zorns?
This is where I'm going to need some feedback. This is for LTAC, and we're thinking about the holiday lights. And we thought, well, who better to run this by but City Council and see what their opinion is. So here's question one, the medallion on City Hall. Do you like it, or is it past its life?
I think some of us are just finding out about the medallion for the first time, so I don't know that we're going to have
Okay.
too great of a response for
It
you.
sits right out here on the front.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, we're going to have to call a break in a few minutes then.
Okay. All right. Then the other one is we have a budget and limited areas of where we can put lights. There's going to be bistro lights on the closed section of Main Street, regardless of what you suggest here. We have a couple of choices. We could hit 57 poles with the garland and ribbon and stuff and go all the way down to Bothell Way. I call it 527, but Bothell Way, and turn up and go up Reader to Reader, where the entrance is for McMinimans. That's option one. Or then basically the other option is to, since the bistro lights are on Main Street, start the wrapped poles on 101st and go down to 5 Bothell Way, and go up as far as 185th. So this street right here. And then that would free up budget to put lights on the bridge. So do like all the way up to McMinimans and no bridge, or go part way up and do the bridge.
I'll add some stuff because I go to RIA 8 meetings, and there's a lot of discussion about artificial light at night in our waterways. And so I guess from that perspective, while it's not an urgent need to limit lighting existing in our city, because most of the issues come from docks on Lake Sammamish and Lake Washington, still would want to try and limit artificial light at night.
What if it was on a timer and went off at 10 o'clock?
That's limiting, right? So I'd want to make sure that that was elevated here, because not everyone goes to those meetings. So
Right. So do you have a preference? Just for the aesthetics?
I have no preference.
Big help. Okay.
What's the time frame that we're talking about?
I think they put it up either the week before Thanksgiving or right at Thanksgiving, and then it stays up through January.
Okay. I don't have feedback yet, I'm thinking.
Okay. Well, you can let me know later. Yes.
Can you clarify, I'll say for people watching, or me, who they is when you refer to they put them up?
They, boy, you're going to ask me for the company's name.
Is this something that is funded by?
Yes, LTAC pays for it.
Trying to make sure I'm tracking.
Yeah, Nick, do you remember the name of the company?
So doesn't matter. We don't have to advertise. I guess what I'm asking for clarification on is, so LTAC as a board makes a decision about spending LTAC dollars.
Right. To bring tourism in and get heads in beds.
And it is paid for through, okay. So I just wanted to clarify that.
It's not out of city budget.
Too. And then, so they're in the middle of that decision. When are they trying to make that decision by?
I don't know when they want the decision by. I think, by the end of August, beginning of September, they'd be good.
Okay.
It's not a huge decision.
Those were questions that I had in my head, so I figured I'd ask them on behalf of council for the feedback, but there may be others as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
It doesn't have to be made tomorrow, but if you end up with an opinion, please let me know, and then I'll pass it on to LTAC.
Go ahead.
Just a question. Is that how usually the process is? LTAC just makes, you triggered the question in my mind, like, is that how it works? Like, LTAC gets the money from the taxes, hotel tag, and then the board just...
They decide.
Without going through any city processes?
Well, there's city staff there, there's a council, one or two council members there, and then it's the businesses who are impacted, who pay into the lodging tax, and a couple representatives of those who benefit from tourism dollars.
What I might suggest, if there is the opportunity, is that we can get together before one of the next two meetings and involve Danae McGee, who's a staff member that supports LTAC too, and write some of this up to get some context to help the decision. But now the thought is planted for council, and maybe we could come back and get some, if that helps. I'm not hearing any strong. And it might, to Councilmember Kerr, to your question too, maybe we could explore some clarity on that.
Yeah, it wasn't my intention to make it a huge production, just see if you had gut reactions to it, so.
I have one gut reaction that I want to get out. I would just say that in general, like, I would love to see more lights where people gather as opposed to where they drive. So if we're putting it on one highway versus a bridge over another highway, I don't have really strong opinions. But if we were able to do that someplace downtown where people gather, where people exist, and to beautify a place where people will stay a little while, that's what I'd prefer.
Yeah, and those lights will be there. I think part of what LTAC wants to do is because people can shoot right through 522 and not even really be aware that they've gone through Bothell, and have things that make Bothell sparkle a little bit and make people go, hey, that would be a great place to go spend an evening.
Has there been any thought, because especially when we say holiday lights, we're talking about Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. Sometimes other holidays fall in that time frame. Sometimes they don't. And there was a really interesting discussion last year when we were approached to put Ramadan decorations on city property, and the city declined because we don't promote one holiday over the other. And this is money that comes from lodging within the city, and it's separate, and there's a lot of intricacy there. But when I think about, I don't want to call out our neighbor, but Kenmore has some really cool new signs that, like, you are in Kenmore, welcome. And we have some very green sort of signs that I think have sustained my entire life in Bothell, in most parts of the city. Has there been any thought about spending that LTAC budget on just, hey, you're in Bothell, like placemaking through announcing that they're here? So instead of seasonal lights, putting some robust, like, you're in Bothell, here's what you can do here signage up.
Well, then you're having conversation with WashDOT on where you're putting those signs, if it's on a highway. We've had conversation about putting place finding along the trail, so when cyclists are going through, they know, hey, if I turn here, I can go right into downtown. The problem is Bothell only has little pieces of terra firma along that trail that they can plant a sign. But yes, we've had conversations.
Well, and we have signs. I mean, highways should be okay because, again, Kenmore does it. That's Kyle's favorite thing that I say. But if Kenmore can do it, we can do it. But also, there are signs on 228th, just when you head east of the gun range and you hit city limits, or when I'm coming from Juanita and I'm going down. King County roads always get me, but when I'm coming, by the old golf course and everything. So it's really, there are a lot of different opportunities. And I would love to explore that because I love lights. I mean, the ones on Main Street, the lighted sign, those are awesome. I just wonder if there's a more permanent way to announce, like, hey, you're in Bothell, and it's kind of cool.
There's great ideas. The selling point that we're going to have to do is it's supposed to appeal to people who live 50 miles or more away where they would want to put a head in bed. And so how would we bring that sign on our back streets?
This
that's a conversation we would
like
have.
a lovely conversation to have at an LTAC meeting.
Yes.
And I think we've probably about killed this tonight, but I know staff's got a few things that they're going to bring back for when we discuss this again.
And we can talk later.
Councilman Roberts?
I have an update from the Regional Crisis Response Agency. Many of us attended the first anniversary of Racer's celebration and party last couple weeks ago now. And it was just a really great event to see so many elected leaders, both from the legislature and from the 5 cities that have formed Racer together to kind of celebrate the good work that is being done with the organization. And then I can also provide an update on the Principals Assembly that met after. So after, everybody got to be there for the party, we got to stick around and have a meeting. But it was great to see. Some of the updates are that Racer's on track to double encounters and individuals served in 2024 over 2023. Which means that the dispatch services are working. I think the profile of the agency has been improved. And so there's just an easier way of getting people contacted. You might be interested to knowing how many people in Bothell have been served. And so in the first 6 months of this year, 174 individuals have received support and contact from Racer. They're reporting the NORCOM transition is working really well. For dispatching crisis responders to people. As you've seen, the vehicles are now wrapped and labeled as crisis responders. There's one right outside. If you look out the window, you'll see it at the police department. It's usually there. It might not be there right now. They do go out in the community. That is the point. But it's just kind of exciting to see that they're located at each of the different city halls, and so I've seen them at Lake Forest Park and at Kenmore City Hall, and Shoreline City Hall, and so they're out in the community, and it's looking really good. Just to know that there is a compassionate response to people who are encountering some struggles in their lives. So one of the things that kind of came out of that meeting as well as the celebration is that the model for someone to call, someone to respond, somewhere to go, and someone to follow up. That's the fourth piece, is that follow-up piece. We have that almost completed because at the end of this month, perhaps next month, we are also going to be invited to another celebration for the opening of the Connections and Crisis Stabilization Center. We will have completed a compassionate and crisis continuum of care in North King County, and that's a huge accomplishment. That's like culture change for our residents, and it's something to be really, I think, excited about. And so I hope soon we will hear about the opening date for the Crisis Stabilization Center, and we'll all be able to celebrate that too. And if you have any questions, I might have information for you.
Councilmember Dodd?
Thanks. I have one update for the North Urban Human Services Alliance, which I typically call NUSA, so I had to think that one through. But for NUSA, Celia Sodal, longtime executive director, has transitioned to a new role with Lake Forest Park Commons, where Third Place Book is. So we're very happy for her and sad to see her go. And Sarah Arndt is now the executive director for NUSA, who you may know as a council member in Woodinville. So it's been a very smooth transition. She had previously been on the board as a Woodinville City Council member. So far, so good. It's been like 2 weeks, but it's going great so far.
All right, I will ask for a projected agenda discussion. Suggestions? And if not, we will move on, and I'd love a motion to approve the consent agenda. Councilmember Mankey.
So moved.
Second.
I've got a motion from Councilmember Mankey and a second from Councilmember Alders to approve the consent agenda. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, City Clerk?
Thank you. Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember Kurd?
Yes.
Councilmember Menke?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you, City Clerk. All right, next up, we have our first, we want to take 10? Okay. It is 7:17. We will be back at 7:27. Welcome back to the council meeting.
Recording in progress.
I love the vibe that's happening in here, but we do have public business to get to. Next up is Agenda Bill 24-110. It's the public hearing for proposed Bothell Municipal Code Title 17 updates, residential single lot frontage improvements. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. And we do, in fact, have a public hearing. You will be familiar with this topic. We discussed it at our last meeting on June 25th at the study session. Tonight, the goal is to hear from community members and see if there's any feedback for consideration. There's no action being sought other than to open and close the public hearing tonight. We do anticipate this item coming back in the form of an ordinance for consideration for council in a future meeting. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Boyd Benson and to tee things up for the public hearing. Go ahead, Boyd.
Thank you, City Manager and City Council. Tonight we'll have a brief presentation concerning information that we've presented in the past. We've abbreviated this with the understanding that the background documents we've presented so far are within a written record, so we anticipate the community will look at that. Tonight we have Jacqueline Brandenburg, acting Public Works Director as well. Next slide. So tonight we're just seeking, do we have to open the public hearing?
After you talk and before the community has a chance to respond.
Thank you, sir. Just checking. A brief overview of the information to date. This is intended to obtain comment from the community and no action is requested at this time. Brief summary of what we've done. Back in 2021, we did update the municipal code to better define what was required for single lot redevelopment. And that clarified existing requirements and added some proportionality. 2023, we saw House Bill 110 and House Bill 1337 for middle housing and ADUs. And staff brought forward some amendments to the municipal code to address those requirements. And at that time, it became very apparent that our current Title 1709 did not strictly comply with the requirements of those state regulations. We then went to City Council to see if you'd like to entertain some amendments to those regulations to address those issues, and Council concurred. We then brought draft information to the Planning Commission and also developed some interim measures. Planning Commission provided some recommendations and conclusions that were coincident with staff's comments, and we presented those at a study session a whopping 2 weeks ago. We did not have significant difference of opinion from council, at least in our opinion. So tonight we're having a public hearing to obtain public comment. Once again, the issue, frontage and utility requirements for residential single lot development. We've discussed in the past that these requirements for larger commercial or subdivisions are pretty similar across different communities. And these will address the new ADU and middle housing requirements, complete public hearing. And then right now we're currently under commerce review for the draft language for Title 17. That review is a 60-day review and it should be complete by September 1st. So barring any changes to the approach or comments from Commerce, we will then bring back the information for council consideration. A very quick summary of current frontage policy. Once again, subdivisions, multifamily, commercial. It's very apparent with respect to nexus proportionality that they're generating many trips. They're intensifying land use typically, and that we can ensure frontage improvements. And this is similar to other nearby cities. Our current requirements for ADUs and single lots have a % threshold. And it basically states if your redevelopment project exceeds 50% of the value of the current development, then you'll install frontage. And if it's less than that, you'll install reduced frontage up to a 25% max improvement value. So that's our current. Our proposed future is to leave the subdivision multifamily commercial as is. ADUs, House Bill 1337 expressly prohibits construction of frontage improvements for those type of uses, so it's very easy to take care of that. And then we also kind of came to the understanding that because ADUs can be almost similar to another single-family residential unit, there's not a lot of difference between a home with an ADU and a home with another home. So we proposed a threshold that if you, this is the new staff-written PC recommendation, if you are 2 or less units and you stay below a 100% increase in gross floor area with respect to the parent property, no frontage is required. And then if you're greater, so you have a single family residence and you demolish it and put in 3 or 4 units, you're exceeded 2, you most likely exceeded 100% gross floor area, then you install frontage. We have added language in the municipal code to make it very clear that applicants, especially for middle housing that may go up to 4 units, have the opportunity to demonstrate that their land use does not intensify or impact utilities and transportation, and therefore frontage improvements may not be required to the full extent. And that's similar to what we do now. Next slide, please. And lastly, we think it's very important that our community members have utilities and good utilities. So we wanted it to be very clear for this type of single lot redevelopment, not plats, not commercial. No in-street main work would be required. So if you have an existing water main or a sewer main or a storm main, there's no reason to upsize it unless it's the deficiency that means you can't, let's say a pipe blockage for storm. Of course, we'd have them take care of that. However, all homes and all dwelling units in the city of Bothell should have good services. So if you have a substandard water service line, that's the line from the main to the meter to the home. Let's say it's older galvanized pipe that might be corroded and doesn't provide required flow, then we'd require that to be upgraded. And it's the same with the sewer service lines. If you have the sewer service line is the responsibility of the property owner from the main to the home, and if it's full of roots and broken up and we're seeing issues, we ask that be improved or repaired to current standards. And then the other part of this is it's very clear that for this type of housing where you can actually subdivide, and that's a tenet in House Bill 1110, to reach this density, that if those dwelling units were subdivided and they could be fee simple, then each owner of that dwelling unit should be responsible for their own water utility and billing and sewer and the rest. So we are requiring that for detached ADUs and anything like that you see in the left-hand side of the screen, that they'd each be individually metered. We've implemented a reduced facility charges for both sewer and water to accommodate smaller uses. But then if you have multifamily that cannot be subdivided, it could be condominiumized or rented or something else like you see on the right-hand screen, then yes, for sure, that could have common plumbing, common service, and a common meter. So that's kind of where we are. The nice thing about the approach on the left, it really does promote affordability, especially with the reduced facility charge. Yes, please. And that's what we have to present to you this evening. Once again, this is to obtain comment from the community. No council action is required or requested this time, and we'll come back to council at a later date to entertain revisions to Title 1709. Anything to add? Okay. Thank you so much.
Does anybody on council have any questions before I open the public hearing? Councilmember Curd.
I have a clarifying question. Thank you for the presentation. In the proposed revised code section in 1709-010, subsection B, number 2, letter C, there's a difference in the way that we talk about 100% and 100% increase, and I'm hoping that I have it, that my understanding is correct, that we're limiting these to 100% increase, which would be like a doubling. And so in the subsection B to C, it mentions less than or equal to 100% gross floor area of the existing dwelling unit. But then later on, it talks about 100% increase. That would be in subsection C on page 161 of the packet. So I'm hoping to get some clarity there.
Most definitely. We will revisit this language to make sure it's clear. But right now it is intended. We try to take the passive voice. If you're less, then you'll do this, and if you're more, you'll do this. We can definitely look at revising that language, and we can work with the legal department on that to make sure it's crystal clear. Because if you're asking questions, then the community may be asking questions. So we can look at that, and that would be a small enough revision with the Department of Commerce that it wouldn't even be something we'd have to be concerned about.
Great. Just to check my understanding, is it meant to be like a doubling of gross floor area? Okay, so that would be a % increase, not just a percentage.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much.
But we will definitely follow up and make sure that's clear.
Understood. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to open the public hearing and kick it over to the city clerk to see if anybody's signed up to speak.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. Yes, we have one person signed up to speak, and that is Mark Swanson, and I am bringing him in right now, but we are having trouble getting him in. There he is. Mr. Swanson, can you hear us?
I can, Laura. Thank you.
Go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Greetings, all. You know, it was pretty easy to see this coming. Watching the Planning Commission over the last month or so and going on. What this frontage change is doing, it's lessening the cost on condo builders that tear down family residences so they can do small time development so they can, quote unquote, for the right attitude of reducing the affordable housing threshold, which I don't think it's going to do at all. We don't even have an affordable housing when it comes to rent problem in this city. I've demonstrated that numerous times. So you're putting the burden on people who want to build single family homes. And then you're sucking money out of the rich developers that build great, big, huge apartments that really, in fact, don't reduce affordable housing either. This infill development quest of the BOPOP urbanists is going to displace our deer. It's going to kill our salmon. It's actually going to threaten the South Sound orca. We don't need a tree ordinance now because it doesn't pencil out to tear down the trees the way the comprehensive plan currently reads. So, what am I looking at here? Well, my dream for the last 32 years in Bothell is essentially dead. I went back and forth to Tukwila for 12 years to avoid the resurgence of Federal Way. I didn't want to live there, and now you brought Federal Way to me. And you're going to continue to bring Federal Way to me, which means more traffic, more crime, more dead salmon, more dead birds, more crows. Who's the bully here? All I did was buy a house up on West Hill. That's all I did. And I've got you Marxists fooling around, hijacking our comprehensive plan, using nice words to do nasty things. Read our old comprehensive plan. What's it going to take, you all? A recall petition? I'm out.
Thank you. That's all I have for public comment. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak? That's all I have.
Thank you, City Clerk. I'm going to close the public hearing. And no actions required this evening, so I think we're good. You guys have what you need? Awesome.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next up is Agenda Bill 24111. It's a resolution to approve comprehensive garbage, recyclables, and compost collection contract with Recology, King County. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, another topic that will seem familiar. Back on March 5th, the council held a study session where staff went over RFP scoring criteria with council to make sure that you kind of got to help inform the answer key before we started getting responses. That has paid off, and we are now at a point of where there is a contract before you for potential action. And to guide you through with what came back to the city and what the contract includes, and to answer any questions tonight, I'd like to introduce Sustainability Coordinator Emily Warnock. And with that, I'll turn things over to Emily.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. I'm Emily Warnock, Sustainability and Engagement Coordinator. Tonight, I am here to share an overview of the proposed contract of the comprehensive garbage, recyclables, and compost collection with Recology for the period of July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2035. So first, I'll briefly go over contract history and the RFP process before discussing key elements of the proposed contracts and rates. And then, of course, answer any questions that you may have. So for a quick overview of our solid waste contract history here in Bothell, we had a contract with Waste Management that ran through 2014. Recology took over that contract in 2015 after a competitive procurement process similar to the one that we just underwent. And that contract was extended for 3 years as allowed under the contract and expires at the end of June 2025. So the process to determine a new contract started last year with city staff and our consultant, developing a draft RFP and contract, and going through the process to conduct the most competitive and equitable procurement we could. So the draft RFP and contract were informed by community, council, and staff feedback, including that study session that the city manager mentioned happened in March, as well as a community survey that we conducted last August. The RFP was released on March 21st, and proposals were due on May 9th. We received one proposal from Recology, which was thoroughly reviewed to make sure that it met our criteria, and we elected to start negotiations. Playing into that decision was data from that survey I mentioned that happened in August. We had overwhelming satisfaction indicated by that survey with current service. About 91% of respondents were satisfied. And then we also had the larger community survey that was conducted in March, and that showed similarly high satisfaction with current service. And that brings us to July, with mobilization time until the new contract starts in July of 2025. And that's to prepare communications, order trucks, and be ready to implement new programs. So one of the things that we heard over and over again through community feedback was that the services currently offered should continue. So the proposed contract includes a lot of programs that will stay or will be improved upon from our current contract. So highlighting a few of those key programs, we have embedded recycling collection that will continue for all customers to encourage recycling. Recology will also provide slotted lids for multifamily recycling dumpsters, and that's to help prevent or mitigate persistent or extreme contamination, which is something that other cities have had a lot of success with. The Recology store is a great community resource to recycle special items like styrofoam, small appliances, and electronics, and that'll also stay along with extended curbside recycling collection for a lot of those same items. Christmas tree composting will continue for single-family customers, and that'll actually be expanded to multifamily customers as well. The low-income senior and low-income disabled discounts will continue at 25% to match our water sewer discounts that we offer. And as we discussed at the prior study session, I also wanted to share a little bit more about what we looked at as far as options to provide additional support to customers. So we did look at the best option for our community members beyond those who qualify for the low-income senior or low-income disabled discounts. And walking through what options might look like, we landed on really making sure that we are streamlining the process as much as we can for people who need that financial support and meeting them where they're already getting support. So with that, we met with a couple of local nonprofits to plan what a partnership might look like to provide a garbage bill assistance fund outside of the contract. And the plan is to use administrative fees from the proposed contract to fund that program. We're still working on details, but I do anticipate having more to share with all of you by the end of the year. And that program would be planned to coincide with the start of this new contract. So moving on, another program that will continue is food scrap containers and recycling tote bags provided to multifamily customers. That's something that we have done to encourage food waste and recycling diversion through our WasteWise program, and that's been very popular. Inclement weather drop boxes that the city can request for collection of material during weather events will also be improved so that we can request those drop boxes earlier to be located centrally in our community and utilized rather than after 2 consecutive weeks of missed service. And services for city facilities and events will also continue. Again, these are highlights from the contract based on the feedback we've received, but the proposed contract does include other things like annual service mailers for all customers and enhanced performance fees. So along with continued programs, we have a number of added programs and services. One being free on-call bulky waste pickup of up to 2 items per household per year. That helps with disposal of items like mattresses and big bulky appliances. An on-call compostable cleanup program was also added, so that allows for 3 free pickups for extra yard waste per household per year to accommodate fall leaf cleanup, and yard waste cleanups. Another new feature that'll have a big impact is embedded multifamily and commercial compost collection. So that'll expand on embedded compost collection that we currently have for single-family customers to help increase compost diversion across the city. Diverting materials out of the garbage and into recycling and compost can help people decrease their garbage container size as well, and that can help offset costs to customers. It also supports King County's efforts. It can, in the long run, help to lower or keep disposal rates for garbage lower over time by extending the life of the landfill. And it also helps businesses meet requirements of the Washington State Organics Management Law, which is phasing in requirements for compost service. So in conjunction with that, Recology will work with commercial customers to provide education, training, and additional resources like interior compost collection bins and compostable bags for up to 25 businesses a year to help further support with transition and addition of compost service. Also expanding on that, the proposed contract includes a full-time outreach specialist from Recology dedicated to Bothell, focused on things like site visits, events, presentations, and then other technical and educational support that can be provided. They do work with consultants to provide in-language assistance for customers as well. And part of that work will also focus on developing a contamination reduction plan in conjunction with city staff. Up next, if collection is missed, more communications will be required to update customers on when to expect service. And then the new contract will also include 100% renewable natural gas, electric support vehicles, and will pilot 100% electric collection trucks. And then lastly, with the focus on compost service, we've added free annual cart cleaning upon request just to help cut down on any issues that people might have with, compost building up in their containers and wanting to make sure those are clean. All right, so you may recall that during the RFP process, we included a set of services for haulers to include alternate pricing for. Based on internal review and discussion, we opted to include embedded multifamily and commercial compost, like I mentioned, and the Recology store as well as a popular and well-utilized benefit. So we moved forward with those two alternatives. We also requested pricing for embedded community cleaning services. Those are things like litter cleanup, graffiti removal, and pressure washing at city facilities. It's something that's included in our current contract, but looking at the pricing, we opted to include set rates in the contract for the services that the city can request rather than subsidizing costs for those services through customer rates. Inclement weather credits are another alternative where the proposed rate increase did not outweigh the potential benefit. And then lastly, this flat 5% service component escalator we included to assess potential cost reductions over the life of the contract. Those weren't expected to benefit customers in the long run based on the average CPI increases we have seen since our current contract started in 2015. So instead of the proposed contract continues the method that we use right now of annual rate modifications based on CPI. Okay, so at the study session in March, we talked about an estimated or anticipated 40 to 60% increase in rates. And as you can see here, our rates will increase. This chart shows rates under the current contract compared to what is proposed for the most common service levels for both residential and then multifamily and commercial customers. On average, we are looking at about a 53% increase, which is in line with what other cities have seen during recent procurements, although rate increases are, of course, never ideal. So that might leave you wondering if that is comparable to what other cities have seen during recent procurements, where that puts us in comparison to other cities for overall rates in the area. That's something that can be very difficult to compare since there are so many factors that go into the rates, variety of services and programs that are being offered. But even with the rate increase that we're looking at, we'll still have one of the lowest rates for similar cities in the area. I also want to note in this that we are looking at rates in 2024 dollars so that we can more easily compare them to our current rates. But just like under the current contract, rates will be adjusted annually by King County's disposal fee, the fixed annual charge, and CPI. One last thing to note on this slide is this includes an 8% administrative fee. So we have that currently set at 8% under our contract, and that's used to fund things like solid waste program administration, pavement maintenance to mitigate damage caused by the heavy garbage trucks. And we also plan, as I mentioned, to use a portion of that to fund a low-income assistance program. And with that, I'll say thank you and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Councilmember Alders.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for coming and talking us through the contract. They can be very detailed. One thing of note that I would like to ask you about, and you maybe described the role, but the designated zero waste specialist, can you explain what that role is and how we might, how the community might interact with the person in that role?
Absolutely. So that position will be focused on waste diversion education about recycling and composting, what goes where, how to dispose of specific items that maybe are a little bit harder to recycle. One thing we plan to do is continue partnership with that position on our WasteWise program for multifamily properties, where we partner with different properties within the city and provide resources and technical education door to door to help encourage people to make sure that they're putting the correct materials in the right bins. That'll include attendance at events and educating the community in that way. And then a portion of that will also be, or is anticipated to be, commercial outreach focused on businesses to help increase compost diversion in particular, but educate and provide technical assistance for signage and arranging of containers to help support community members and provide training where appropriate too.
Yeah, thank you for that that description. Sounds like a big job for a lot of that individuals can reach out to and kind of interact. And so I'm wondering if at some point we might be introduced to this person in this role, or we just have to look for them at an event kind of thing.
Absolutely, we can arrange for that, and they will be partnering closely with staff on our programs and continuing and expanding those as well.
Great, thank you. And then I'm wondering, can you provide a breakdown of the 50? You said the 53% increase of rates. What is it possible to kind of calculate what percentage of those of that increase is related to specific programming increases, so that we know sort of the why behind the increase?
To an extent. So for the two alternatives that we opted to move forward with, the embedded compost collection for multifamily and commercial customers, and the store, it's a little bit easier for us to put a percentage amount on that because pricing was proposed separately. So I believe it was about 3.1% of the increase can be attributed to those specific programs. Apart from that, it is difficult to put a percentage amount on separate programs or services that are included under that contract.
Yeah, I don't know if there's maybe a better way than of kind of breaking down like where the costs are going as our rates are increasing, but I would think that members of our community would be interested in knowing a little more detail and the why, because 53% increase is a lot, but I do appreciate your point that we're still getting affordable services for the area. So thank you for including that.
And Councilmember Aldrich, I think in the outreach we do to the community, because again, these rates are not going to go into effect right away, that the part to consider is and I think what Emily is sharing is the proposal doesn't include this rate goes here, this rate goes here. So that's why just those two. But what we can also do is put in the context of around, this is comparing to rates that were proposed 10 years ago and some of the other factors that have gone into the industry. So we can certainly think about that in terms of the outreach and communication that does go to the community.
Yeah, I think you get what I'm asking for, so thank you.
Councilmember Zorns.
Two things. Thank you for the presentation. The perils of looking at, what the city of Bothell is doing. Maybe a year ago, I saw staff got to do a cool tour of recycling. And I don't know about the rest of our council members, but I would love a chance to go tour the recycling. So just there's that piece. Because we had a period not too long ago where recycling was really difficult. So, and then the other question I have is that I noticed that there's going to be, part of the fee is covering road damage, wear and tear from the heavy trucks. And this is a question that I'm going to ask you, but probably more Director Greenspan can answer it. I was thinking on my hill, not too long ago, there were big dump trucks going up and down residential streets, tore our street up. Are there, for new developments, is there any kind of fee if they're going down residential roads to offset damage that they might be doing to roads? Inquiring minds want to know, or at least one mind wants to know.
We'll look into that and follow up.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Mankey.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to express appreciation for your work on this and highlight a couple things that I really appreciate in this contract. One of them is that 3 additional yard waste bag for leaf cleanup. Have that every year. I usually have several extra bags, so I think a lot of people in the city are going to be happy about that. Also surprised to see 2 cart allowance for recycling. That's great. I'm always playing Jenga with my cart, trying to get everything in there. So knowing that I can not have to cut boxes down to size and try to get them in the cart is great. Also, the 6-inch lid pop on the bins, also fantastic. Can't tell you how many times I've had to jump into a bin or put my kids in the bin to smash it down. So that makes me feel good. Love the Recology store in Canyon Park. Go there at least once a month to drop things off for recycling. I'm a little bit of a recycling nut, which probably surprises people here on the dais, but I'm fanatical about it. So I appreciate having that there. And then also thank you for putting the increased communication into the contract for missed pickups. I feel heard on that. I know I kind of harped on that a lot during the study session. So I appreciate that. And I know our neighbors will appreciate that as well. So thank you.
Our email inboxes will appreciate that. Yeah. Did you? Oh. Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you. I'm jealous that your kids will jump into the bin because mine won't, and I'm not getting in there. But I did want to say thank you for this process. I know that I think there was a collective sort of slightly nervous anticipation given everything that's happened in the world of solid waste since the last time that we negotiated this. And I appreciate the city manager's commitment to get us, I'm going to call it talking points. In my day job, whenever something big happens, somebody puts everything that we might need to know and talk about together, and that really helps us from having to hunt down things in the moment. So that is appreciated. I also appreciate the communication commitment. I do think that Recology, anyone can always do better. I also have somehow in the recent past talked to a lot of other providers, customers who don't live in Bothell, and I think that Recology does do also good work. So I appreciate that and the commitment to getting better, because that does mean a lot to people. Yeah, this is exciting, and I'm excited that we can still visit the store. So that'll be great. Thank you.
Councilmember Curd.
Thanks for the presentation, and thanks staff for your amazing work on this over the last couple of years. It's been in a long time, but I think it's really paid off. As someone who lives in a multifamily unit, I really want to say thank you for getting embedded compost into multifamily. I think that's a great opportunity to work at scale on waste diversion, and I think people who live in multifamily units in our town are ready to start composting if they don't already pay for it. And the other thing I wanted to point out that I was really excited about, which we didn't even talk about in the presentation, was that the yard is moving to Maltby, which is taking a huge amount of vehicle miles off the road going to South Seattle all the time. And I just really commend Recology for looking into ways to make waste collection a little bit more resilient. I'm thinking in times of maybe emergency, it is going to be a lot more helpful to have a yard closer to Bothell than all the way in South Seattle, where those vehicles can get maintenance and energy. So thanks again, and I'm really encouraged by the direction this contract is going.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you for the hard work. I wanted to, in addition to all the good things they said, I just want to go back to what Councilmember Alders mentioned in the beginning about not only the price increase, and I appreciate we're going to get the breakdown, but it is quite a big jump to a lot of people. And you did suggest that we provide, it's a more than 53% increase, but we're providing only 25% assistance. There's a 28% gap there, and you did suggest that you're looking into things, the streamlined process and all that. You come back to us later. Is this something we can also talk about within our budgeting session or conversations we're going to have towards the end of the year?
We can definitely include that in the conversations. And like I mentioned, the increased rates will also increase the administrative fee that the city has to use for funding a program like that. So we are looking to put some of those funds into a pool that community members can draw from when they need assistance with their garbage bills to try to combat that extra 25% that is missing in the gap there.
Yeah, because how regular would this draw be? So if every month I need help, we're very fortunate. A lot of us don't need help, but a lot of us do also. So on a regular basis. So how can we create a program? Because rates are going to increase, when the contract is in by 50%, then every year there's inflation or whatever, cost increases. So that has to, I just think about that also for our community members. I mean, we had a conversation about mobile homes earlier, and, so there's a population, residents in our city that will require quite a bit of assistance. I just wanted us to include that in our plans moving forward.
And thank you, Deputy Mayor. And I know from past budget rate conversations that we've had beyond solid waste as well, there has been an interest in council of making sure that we know what are the tools available and consideration of additional tools. So we'll take that into consideration, and as you requested, we can bring back some options in the budget conversation for sure.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you. City Manager, I wanted to add one thing. I went to a manufactured home owner forum held at Homage Senior Services in Linwood somewhere between 1 and 30 months ago. I'm kidding, it was like 2 months ago. And one of the things that was interesting to me is when the manufactured home parks change ownership, there are perhaps owners who are not particularly used to administering such a property. And so some things like and I'm going to say this from memory, so I'm going to trust that our staff will verify and give us guidance, but if the lease calls out a set, like what is included in the rent, and let's say garbage is included, you cannot, as the landlord, then say, and now you're paying me $50 a month for garbage in the middle of your lease. But stuff like that does happen. So I think I would love, as we look at assistance programs, a holistic approach to help people understand what if the challenge that they're running into is actually allowed to be charged to them under law and all that stuff. So, because sometimes I think that you can't be a legal expert in every area of your life, and when you're already struggling to survive, right? Like it's harder to be like, which of these fees are they allowed to charge me? How do I fight that, right? So getting like more holistic resources in addition to the programs that we've talked about.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I'll go. Just thank you for going through this process. I've personally been very pleased with Recology in general. I love the store. Every time I go in there, it's full and people are bringing things in, which is the whole point of the thing. I won't belabor some of the points that my colleagues made up here tonight, but I'm very glad that you all made them, and I liked the direction a lot of the conversation was going in up here. So looking forward to continuing those conversations, and I think we need action tonight. Councilmember Dodd?
I move the recommended action.
Second.
All right, I have a motion from Councilmember Dodd and a second from Councilmember Alders to, nope, that's the next one. Adopt a resolution approving the comprehensive garbage, recyclables, and compost collection contract with Recology King County for the period of July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2035. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, City Clerk?
Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember Kurd?
Yes.
Councilmember Menke?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcott?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right, next up, we have a study session. So we're going to...
And Mayor, we actually have a brief item before we get to the study session.
You're right.
I can introduce myself.
Yeah. I appreciate it. You do a great job. We are appointing joint fire and medical advisory board members. It's Agenda Bill 24-112, and now I will kick it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor, and it's a brief item, I believe. Council may recall that towards the beginning of the year when we were going over council committees and assignments, there was a majority of council who was interested in the public serving on the Public Safety Committee, of which there is 3 members allowed. What we agreed to do is then bring fire and police updates to the full council for consideration. You'll have an example of that next week where we're going to be having a study session to get some feedback on a policy direction. One of the consequences of that, though, too, is that in the past few years, we do have in our interlocal agreement with Fire District 10, we need to have 2 designated representatives to have an annual meeting, which is for the Joint Fire and Medical Advisory Board. We have traditionally pulled those 2 individuals from the Public Safety Committee, since those were the 3 council members who expressed the most interest in serving, and it worked and made sense. So we do now, instead of having a pool of 3 people to choose from, we have a pool of 7 people to choose from. What we're looking for tonight then is if we can have a designated 2 representatives from council for a meeting, and then one alternative would be a helpful thing just in case life happens and conflicts come up by September. What we'll do then is start polling for dates with the Fire District 10 commissioners, the fire chief, and then the 2+1 appointed council members. We'll get something on the calendar. Just by way of background too, in your packet, you'll see that the section from the ILA that outlines this committee is included, as well as an agenda from last year's meeting. So sort of know what you're buying if you volunteer. And with that, I'll turn it over to you to have a discussion of, as we do when we appoint, we can do this by concurrence. If it's easy, if we need to have a vote, we can have a vote. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mayor, to lead the discussion of volunteers.
Thank you. Councilmember Zorns.
This committee is fun, if you can say committees are fun, but if I could recruit our Snohomish folks, if they're interested at all, because this is kind of their neck of the woods. So I would defer to our Snohomies if they would like to have a seat at the table.
I'll go if you go, Ben.
I'm happy to.
Okay. Snohomies are in. If everybody else is cool with that, I mean, knock on the door if you want.
I'm going to speak for everybody else and say they're cool with that.
I knew it.
We need an alternate?
Who lives closest to the border, aside from the two of us?
It is me. I can see Snohomish County from my house.
All right. Do we need action on this, or are we good?
That sounds good, and I'll let Catherine know, and she'll start working with staff on this.
I'm holding it together, but I want to laugh too. All right, perfect. I think we are. I think we're good to go there. And now we have a study session. It's 8:16. We're going to take a 5-minute break so we don't have to run down there, and we'll start the study session at 8:21. All right, welcome back, everybody. We have a study session tonight as our last agenda bill of the evening on potential new advisory bodies. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. And as we reflect back on conversations about boards and commissions, I think this is one of the themes and threads that has been going on for the entirety of my time here, and I know before that as well. So tonight we're back to respond to some requests that were made the last time Board and Commission's clarification came before you, and that is to respond to a request for information about potentially adding some additional advisory bodies. Just as a bit of background too, and as a reminder, one of the values of our boards and commissions, we saw that tonight with the Planning Commission coming forward, of one of the biggest values that boards and commissions can provide to city councils is it gives you capacity. So we heard about the consideration that the Planning Commission has been doing on the comprehensive plan, and certainly the council has had many touches of the comprehensive plan over the past year and a half as well. And you think about additively, if you would have had every Planning Commission step on top of that, that is what the work of council would have been over the last 2 years. So when we think about what are the needs and opportunities, that's a really good measure, and I was happy to see we had an example of that play out tonight. So with that, we do have a number of staff who are going to be sharing with you of what they've researched and found, and navigating us through the conversation will be our Assistant City Manager, Becky Range, and I'm going to turn things over to Becky.
Thank you, City Manager. Well, we are happy to be here tonight. Gabby Kuna is back to the table with us, our DEI coordinator, and Anand Mantharpagada is here as our Human Services coordinator. And again, for anyone watching at home, my name is Becky Range. I'm the Assistant City Manager. And so we will be going through a couple of items tonight, and then we're happy to seek your direction and any questions that you have at the end. Just a reminder, this is really just a discussion, and we're taking no formal action tonight. We will briefly go over some background to set some context for why we're having this discussion tonight, and then we will share some of the research that we have learned over the last few months as we've been studying potential new advisory bodies that you've already asked about. And then we'll share a little bit of insight on potential next steps, and as I mentioned, answer any questions that you might have. So just a few quick reminders. In 2023, you did develop the Vision 2040, and throughout that vision document, you prioritized community engagement. It's woven throughout the vision and through several strategic priorities. And so we know that community engagement is a priority for you, and it's very important for our community as well. We do, as Kyle has mentioned, we've already done quite a bit of improvement and work on our advisory body program, and a lot of that's still underway. We do still have items that we're working on. Just some of the highlights that the clerk's office has been doing some great work on with our staff liaisons, how to have more interaction with the boards and commissions and advisory bodies, with you on council. They did a great job. They now record and post all of the meetings so that anybody from the public can go back and watch those meetings after they happen. We are scheduling some joint meetings. Those will be coming up soon. And I think Kyle mentioned we've had more board and commission updates. They'll come to more meetings, and so we're making some real progress. There's been a lot of other administrative items, changes to terms and schedules that we've done to streamline some of the administrative work as well. A lot of that is really ongoing, and it is important that we keep moving on those. But because you had asked about advisory bodies, we wanted to come and discuss that with you, even though we still have some things that are underway. So just to kind of set the stage, when we worked on our community engagement strategy with our staff, and we are publishing a community engagement toolkit, we really found that it's important to just define what advisory bodies are. And we've started to document that in some of our checklists and our toolkits. And we use advisory bodies as a really broad term. It's simply opportunities for the community to provide diverse input to staff and or council. There are a lot of added benefits to advisory bodies that we instinctively know are happening. One of those is it often creates more of a pathway to even more civic involvement. So if you have folks who join a temporary advisory committee or a more formal board or commission, they learn more about our process and our government, and maybe they'll run for city council one day, or they'll be more involved. And one of the other benefits that we're really seeing is there's a more trusting relationship between community members and staff and council. So when you work closely with a community member who's on an advisory board, you understand what each other's needs are, and you get to know people. You get to know your own public servants, and so that's really an added benefit that we're seeing. That's really important for us. Advisory bodies, there are lots of different types. They vary in time commitment, administrative needs, formality, and complexity. So if you look across the region, sometimes they're defined differently and in different ways, but the way we've started to define them here in Bothell are as follows. Something very simple could be a focus group. Potentially a group, you might need a more technical expert. Maybe you want to convene a focus group for 3 or 4 meetings to give you some really expert subject matter expertise on a particular issue. That's pretty informal. It's about as informal as it gets. We will often talk about advisory committees. They are normally temporary in nature. We say ad hoc, but that just means they're going to be chartered for a particular time. And advisory committees are not as formal as a permanent board or commission. They are often appointed by the city manager or sometimes even appointed by staff to help with a particular task or a function. Their committee action and their input is subject to review, and they're not really making decisions. So they're not really making decisions to come to council fully, so they're often not generally subject to OPMA or those, formal meeting requirements and recordings and a lot of that administrative work. We haven't really used a task force since I've been here, but this is a common type of an advisory body that a lot of cities use. Sometimes if you have a particularly challenging topic or a controversial topic, or something that you need to get everyone together and start working on, you could form a task force. The mayor and council could form a task force and ask members of the community, members of staff, members from different departments to all get together and to work on that. And if they're providing guidance directly to council, they often are subject to OPMA or if they're appointed by council. And then the last one, which is of course what most people think of when we say advisory body, a board or commission. That is a permanent body. It's the most formal. It's addressed in our code. It is appointed by council, of course, and they study and recommend different options and actions for council. So we've talked of late most about boards and commissions. So just a reminder, here are the ones that we have, our standing boards and commissions. We have a couple of ad hoc boards, and also we have the chief of police has his current advisory committee that is convened right now as well. So when you asked for us to go back and take a look and do some research and talk about advisory bodies, you know, staff kind of got together and we thought about what's our research approach. And this is kind of the three main areas that we thought about. We thought about broad trends, big picture, what is everyone else in the region doing? And our staff really did a great job and took some time to go and do some thorough research. We won't present all the particular details of that tonight, but really went out, looked at every other city in the region, found the information. What do they have? What do they not have? How is it working? What lessons have they learned from their advisory bodies? What can we learn from them so we don't make those same mistakes? And then we really thought about what is happening in Bothell. So what are our current conditions? What are our gaps in our needs in each of these program areas? And we thought about what are we really trying to do? So we're studying tonight are talking about DEI, human services, and our youth. Like, what are our desired outcomes for them? What are we needing to do in the next year or two to meet Bothell needs? And then we thought a little bit about just planning and current stages. There are some things that we know we think we will eventually do, but there are some foundational steps with some of these new programs that need to be done first, sequentially, before we can build on it and do other things. So that's kind of the framework that we used as we conducted this research. So at this time, I will turn it over to Gabby, who will share a little bit with us about their DEI research.
I'm going to steal your microphone. Hi, all, again. So DEI advisory boards, we reviewed the structure, the scope of work, and the mission of DEI advisory bodies across the region, and looked specifically at comparable jurisdictions. Of the jurisdictions that we reviewed, there were a variety of formal and informal advisory bodies, as well as many jurisdictions that had no standing advisory body. Common themes, even though they had a variety of structures, included advising city staff on strategic plans and policies through the lens of their lived experiences. So really taking into consideration their personal characteristics, their lived experiences, and bringing that to the discussion when they thought about strategic plans and policies. We did see throughout our research that there were multiple concerns about recorded meetings, given that throughout their expertise, they're really talking about their lived experiences, oftentimes dealing with marginalization, and being subject to OPMA or recorded meetings could put them as a target or a disadvantage, and would also shape the way that they feel comfortable sharing. Notably, a DEI advisory body in any form should not replace the need for DEI training or input from other boards or commissions or advisory bodies. It's of importance that we integrate DEI into all that we do, especially our other boards and commissions, rather than siloing all equity concerns onto one single advisory body. And thinking about what next steps might look like for a DEI advisory body, continuing to build and formalize the DEI program. In all that we do, we have a ton of opportunities for engagement as we continue to build that program, as well as forming an ad hoc advisory committee for the 25-26 year. This advisory body would advise staff on the DEI roadmap implementation and give feedback there, as well as help build stronger relationships with our communities and hard-to-reach communities specifically, and act as a bridge to community groups. So it would be a two-way street. So they share information with us, but then they also serve as a liaison to communities that we might not have had relationships with in the past. They can provide insight and engage with our internal equity team, the Dive-In team, which is a really exciting opportunity, as well as advise staff on special topics, projects, and multicultural education. And then these members would be appointed by the city manager and advise staff specifically. And I'll hand it over to Ahmed.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council members. For our human services advisory body, we researched cities in both King County as well as Snohomish County. And we found that across the board, the body's primary function is to review human services grant funding requests as well as make funding recommendations. Besides grant funding, we also saw that the advisory bodies acted as advocates for human services as well as liaisons between community, staff, and city council. In terms of next steps for the Human Services Advisory Body, we are in the final stages of completing our Human Services Needs Assessment, where we plan to lean in on the strategic plan to finalize our program strategy. In terms of one of our initial findings from the needs assessment, we saw that there is a greater need for collaboration and cooperation between human services partners in the city of Bothell. So our first recommendation is to utilize staff time to strengthen and facilitate partnerships between nonprofits and community-based organizations in Bothell. Secondly, our council-led human services subcommittee makes grant funding recommendations and sets our program direction. In terms of next steps, we recommend that the Human Services Subcommittee retains this funding capacity and discuss further on whether we should delegate this decision-making power to community or public advisory bodies.
I will speak to the youth research. This one was really exciting because everyone gets really excited to talk about youth because they're so much fun to interact with and be around. So when we studied other cities in the area, there are a few cities that have standalone youth commissions or youth councils or bodies. They all shared, and most cities shared, that they're very challenged with turnover, which is not surprising. Most of the youth bodies are high school aged, and so that's a kind of a common theme. Most of the groups are very, very large. I was shocked to find that one of them was 45 members. That's a really big advisory body or group. A lot of the groups that have, or a lot of the cities that have standalone youth commissions or youth councils, they're very much associated with teen facilities, teen programming, and volunteering. So we found that the youth commissions and councils operate a little bit differently than a typical board or commission, which is understandable. There's a common theme that there's a really strong partnership with school districts, which is wonderful. Many cities have integrated youth positions into their existing board and commission programs, just like we did. So in just 2020, you'll remember we added youth positions to our parks and arts commissions and boards. And then one of the things that we found was that underlying a lot of the youth programs, much like what we've expressed here, is that there's really a desire for youth education on civic involvement and civic participation. We do want the youth to advise us on our decision making, and we can do that through engagement, but we want the youth to get really involved in public participation and know that they have a voice in their government just like everyone else does. And so a lot of programs kind of are revolved around civic participation. We feel like we have a little bit of work to do with our youth engagement. Over the last year or two, thanks to some of our new staff, we have made great strides in partnering with NSD, but I think a next step is we need to continue that partnership and expand that partnership. One of the very exciting things that staff has been talking to some community members from some NSD committees is they are piloting a program for their students to talk about civic participation. And they would like to partner with us on that program. And so we are very, very excited because that's exactly what we would like to do. So we'd like some time to work on that and strengthen those partnerships with the school district. We think there are some opportunities with their ASB programs and the Bothell High School. They have a lot of clubs that are also involved in leadership in their community, and we've not really integrated ourselves with those programs, not yet. We also think that in conjunction with that school desire to do a pilot program for participation, what that could look like is hosting an annual or a semi-annual youth forum here. I don't know who all in the room got to participate in Law Day. That was really exciting to have students in chambers learning from us. So what if we had a similar event, but it really was about public participation and interacting with their elected officials? That's something we're really excited about. And something like that can reach our objectives, but they also don't have to worry quite so much about turnover. We feel like we could get more students in, but we'd like to hear more about that. In our community engagement strategy, we have been tasked to develop a City Hall 101, like a community academy for the entire city. You know, the police has their community academy, but we will be working on that. We think that City Hall curriculum, it probably needs to be tailored to a youth student perspective, and it could probably be integrated in with that forum that we might do. And then we also really want to continue our collaborative efforts for supporting the Regional Youth Community Center. The MPRSA is doing a lot of work right now, identifying recreation needs for the youth in our area, and we need to keep supporting that effort. So I think those are some good first steps when we think about youth engagement and advisement. I feel like that was a lot of information, and we only kind of gave you the highlights of it, but we'd like to open it up for discussion and feedback and hear what you have to say.
Thank you very much. This is exciting, and I want to be clear that it makes sense why some of this stuff needs to wait. We're in like transition, because I think it would be easy to say like we asked for more and you said not yet, but the reasons make sense, and I appreciate the explanations to 7 very excited people who are like waiting for more. I really love the idea of a youth forum and City Hall 101, both for youth and just people. I think that one of the challenges that we have with our boards and commissions is lately there's been, at least in my 2 years of recruiting, there's been so much interest and only so many seats. And it's really important, you know, to get people engaged in civic participation and to also make these 7 jobs that we have seem approachable and doable to everyone who lives in Bothell. Because if we make it seem like it's 7 people who just sit slightly up on the dais and aren't present, then it seems like it's a job someone else does, and the only way we're successful is if everybody feels like they can do it. And this comes from me thinking a long time ago that it was like adultier adults that were on the city council, and the way that we actually have a city that functions for everyone is having a mix of people who represent like lots of different types of, you know, lives in the city. On that note, when we do like City Hall 101, I would love, and I'm saying that I can commit to this, I'd love to hear from everyone else, but like each cohort has a council member who's there and like is a physical person that people can ask questions of, to make it both just to get to know each other and to also be there, like what does this job do? Because Councilmember Alders and Mayor Thompson and I went to like a 7th grade leadership class at Skyview a while ago, and the kids had great questions. The mayor and I talked about, I hope this isn't a secret, that we both have ADHD, and there were kids in that class who were like, I have ADHD, and like it was just that relation is really important, and I think that building those experiences amongst anyone who wants to raise their hand and participate is super key. So I hope that we can be involved as a group too and take turns and yeah, because I think that's really important.
Not a secret, you're fine. Not a secret to literally anybody that watches these meetings.
I'll jump in. Just a few comments. On the DEI, I like the point that the members are appointed by the city manager based on staff recommendations, and I would hope that staff would be part of informing who these folks are. And human services, members review human services grant funding requests. That's good common sense. So I appreciate that. And then with youth, I really, as somebody who works with youth a lot, you understand the nature of the beast. So I appreciated hearing that. We do have kids who live in Bothell who go to Woodinville High and go to Inglemore. So how do we include them? So there's and North Creek, yeah. And so how do we include them? And, you know, make sure that they don't feel like an afterthought. And then I'm going, what?
Well, I was just going to say, I think you brought up something really important. We often default to the NSD schools, but there are also many other K through 12 school programs in our community that may not go to traditional NSD schools. So
yeah, we have, yeah, we've got Heritage, we've got kids who are in private schools, Cedar Park, we've got kids who are in the alternative high school program. You got your work cut out for you, or somebody does. And then I'm going to muddy the water. I would love if we think at some point, not tonight, but think at some point about having a tree preservation ad hoc or task force or just a focus group that can bring in insight, because a constituent was just telling me that they would love to have this. They've got opinions about how to preserve trees and good ones. You know, they're very informed. And I think the public would appreciate knowing, because that's in the pipeline for trees, right? So it would be nice to have a ad hoc tree preservation group so they can talk about canopy and heritage trees and that sort of thing. And I don't know if anyone else is interested in that, but I think the community would really appreciate having a temporary committee for that.
I'm going to pop in and say I would love like a task force for that as we look at tree canopy protections. And are you referring to Whitney Negebauer's email that we all got?
Oh, yeah. No, yes, but that was Whitney was like the second voice I heard about that, but yeah, she had a great point on that.
And I had asked her for more detail, and I got some, and it's in my email and not in front of me. But I think there's a lot of good work that we can do leaning on people who know the environmental science, and also just balancing where we can build our canopy. I think sometimes people can get hung up on this tree right in front of me is the most important tree. And so also building education and really robust, like, build up that canopy efforts without getting hung up on that one tree.
For today's discussion, I do want to make sure that we're focused on the three that were requested, and we did research. I think we hear the request, but we would need to go back and do similar framing of what is the timing, what is again, one of the thesis points that Becky covered was the importance of having a clear purpose for what is the group doing before we start talking about having one. And I don't want to create excitement of like, oh, the city's going to create a tree canopy ad hoc committee if we're not there yet. So I think bringing that back in context of when there is work to do, we're happy to do that. We'll commit to doing that. But for tonight, I'd like to keep the conversation focused on the three that is in front of you.
I'll jump in and just say I'm always impressed by the thoroughness and thoughtfulness of the work that you all do in considering these things. So thank you for that first and foremost. I'm in agreement with everything proposed. I think before you create something, there needs to be the groundwork laid to have it be effective. And we want it to benefit the city and also have the people involved be benefited by being a part of it. So everything that you said tonight makes sense. I like to see the timelines up there, what you're thinking about and what you're planning to do to lead up to that. So I'm aligned with everything on there, and I don't have any other thoughts or questions.
Firstly, I am so glad both of you are here, to be honest. Like, I'm glad that I joined at the perfect time, City Council, because you guys are here and making things really cool making it really cool to be in Bothell for somebody like me. So I appreciate it. I wanted to ask a couple of questions about, or a few questions about all the stuff we talked about. For DEI, you mentioned, Gabby, something about OPMA and people having a hard time talking about, which makes total sense. I was wondering, and maybe that's a legal question that we can talk about later, but like, is there workarounds to the OPMA rules for like creating a certain entity? I know, that's what I'm saying. Maybe later on. I know. I didn't.
Eileen just choked.
I didn't want to look at her. But if there's something that's needed, but like executive session type stuff in the future.
I can speak to that briefly. Eileen and Kyle can correct me when I'm wrong. But so my understanding is that OPMA applies to bodies that make decisions. The point of making this an advisory committee, they wouldn't be making any formal decisions, but they would be able to bring their insight to staff, which would really help guide our work. So they would not be subject to OPMA as long as they're acting fully in an advisory capacity and not a decision-making capacity. That way the meetings would not have to be subject to OPMA or recorded, and people would feel comfortable sharing maybe more vulnerable experiences that they might otherwise feel.
And is it because they're oh, did you want to add anything?
So Gabby Gabby said almost exactly what I was going to say. And of course I had closed down the tab that I had with this, but yes, it really just depends on what, it's not ad hoc or not. It depends on what they do. If they're taking testimony or making decisions, for example, like salary committee is going to be certainly subject to OPMA, but really just depends on the scope of what they're doing. But I don't have a lot to add to what Gabby did because they did an amazing job telling you.
All right, thank you. And so you said you recommended a 2-year advisory committee for the, is that going to be like every 2 years we're going to renew this? Or can we just say it's a permanent advisory committee where we just churn people every 2 years or something? Giving opportunities to other people.
Yeah, so no training. The hope in making it a 2-year cycle is so that we can really evaluate and assess the community needs and the level of involvement that they would like to see. So rather than jumping right into a permanent advisory committee, ensuring that that's what the community actually wants. So having a ad hoc one would really allow us to get the baseline of like, what does the community want as far as a committee goes? What do they want their level of involvement to be? How often do they want to meet? It would help us before we can actually say like, hey, let's have a permanent thing that we put into code. We need to make sure that we actually hear from a wide variety of voices about what that looks like.
Yes, and if you make it a temporary thing, you only get certain people to show up, but they might not show up. So like this is a build it and they will come type situation in my mind, but yes, testing and learning is brilliant. And my question was, but you popped that question in my mind as you were talking, so yes, I'm agreeing. But then does making it a permanent advisory committee and putting it in code, which we probably should, does that change anything about OPMA or anything like that? Or doesn't matter?
We can, as we take your feedback tonight, we can take a look at what the legal test, there have been challenges to what OPMA applies to. So we can take a look at the legal test and make sure that we design something that with that in mind. And again, I want to be really clear of like that the Open Public Meeting Act is a great thing in terms of
I'm not saying it's bad.
Exactly. Yeah.
To address
to reiterate and that concern. So there's this balance. So if we look at what the roles and duties may be, we'll keep it in mind of what I think honoring that feedback and the lessons from other communities. How do we make sure that the scope is clear and aligns with the intent?
Moving on before we get in trouble. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to add too that I think in the past when we've done ad hoc advisory committees, maybe we haven't done a good job of really communicating with the members and giving them predictability and stability and constant engagement. And so I think what Gabby's envisioning and describing would be so much better than that if they knew they were chartered or termed for 2 years, but they also knew, the predictable cadence of when they were meeting and they were getting a lot of engagement and contact with staff. I think that's what would motivate folks to be engaged and participate. Maybe they don't care so much about what's in code, but they do care that they're meeting a lot and they're getting what they need out of it. So,
and providing advice to council or whoever, staff, whoever, and actually making an impact, because that's why anybody would join something like this. Human services, is there an advisory committee right now for this or no?
No, we don't have an advisory
proposal that you were saying over here, create one?
Yes, so we're recommending we're recommending not yet. Not yet for the advisory committee.
And, okay, so not, because there's one 2025, right? Is that?
Yes, so we are recommending that perhaps we'll start with with collaborating with our human services partners, and then keeping the discussion open, and then talking perhaps in 2025 later on, if there is council need and direction.
I see. Because the question I have, if we decide to move forward, and the question is it going to only be open to service providers, or are there community members also involved in
The
this?
goal will be community members. From what we've seen in other cities, the composition is anywhere between 5 to 11 community members, and they are on a rotating term of either 2 to 4 years. So we would try to emulate something like that.
So, but including putting service providers as this experiment, I mean, what feedback are you going to get versus having community members be part of this experiment? Does that make sense?
If I could help clarify just a little bit, if you don't mind. So the group that we're recommending is really for the service providers to engage with each other and to learn more about each other and to do referrals amongst themselves. So the value of that group is more for them to connect with each other. They will establish a better relationship with staff, and Anand will help facilitate that group and nurture that group, but it's not the same thing as a potential human services council, which would be made up of community members who would then be advising staff and council. Is that?
So yes, that makes sense. Is that what being proposed right now for even 2025?
Yes, so for 2025, we're just proposing that we first get our group of nonprofits together, because we've heard a lot in the assessment about that there's regional groups, but there's not really a strong collaborative, coordinated group of Bothell providers. And a lot of the things that we're seeing in the needs assessment, they're community cooperative visions that we're going to need all of our nonprofits on the same page to move forward on. So that's kind of the first step. But I'm happy that you drew the distinction between having a service provider on a future Human Services Commission versus a community member, because Anand educated me about this. You would have the service providers who are likely grant recipients, so they really can't advise on whether or not they're going to give grants to themselves. So it has to be very thoughtful, and it has to be community members, that are very knowledgeable and could advise on who the grant recipients should be. So did that help at all?
Very, very extremely helpful. I was just waiting for a council member Dot to jump in, but I will continue. Do you want to add to that?
Just directly related about the city-specific one, one of the gaps that I've been on a slight free time crusade on is this sort of like county line thing, because there isn't a great two-county group. There's NUSA, don't really know the NUSA equivalent. SnowTrack does some human services and transportation links, but it's very transportation focused, and in reality, these providers do not say, you live in Sonoma County, so we can't talk to you. Like, they still help people, but getting everybody to talk to each other would be super. So that's exciting.
Mm-hmm. No, that is cool. The the clarification I would like to ask about something about this advisory committee making, because you mentioned we have a human services subcommittee that we meet and we talk about budgets and all that stuff, and which we present to the council as a whole later. But were you suggesting to delegate this to the advisory committee?
No, I was suggesting that the Human Services Subcommittee will continue to retain that decision-making power.
Oh, I see. So I misunderstood. Yeah, because that would be weird for advisory committee. It's like, oh, yeah, no, you have to pay $10 million now. Yeah, because Okay, cool. Youth committee, I really I understand also there's a test and learn and experimentation phase right now since it's new, and I'm glad that we're going to involve more of the people, more of the youth in this. because having regular, frequent programs that engage the youth is, I mean, in general in politics, we all know this. You know, it's like everybody's like, youth aren't engaged and youth don't vote, and it's like because we don't allow them, we don't give them. They don't see people sitting on this dais as approachable or whatever, you know. And so the suggestion that Councilman Woodard made is I like that. I can't read my handwriting. Oh, what about because we mentioned parks and arts. Are we also? Does it make sense to at least think through adding to landmarks and planning? Because those are like chunky ones also. I don't know. That's a technical term.
Yeah, we can take that back.
Thank you.
Could we just maybe not have an age minimum so that people could apply? I like having designated spots on boards where we get a lot of engagement. Third time to bring up Ken Moore, but they did have a youth member of their planning commission for a while, and he's now on their council. And I think if a kid is interested in landmarks or planning or whatever, that's awesome. I also wouldn't want a seat to just go open forever, but I do wonder if there's a reason that we have, like, you have to be 18 or whatever it is.
Maybe it's to give more opportunity for kids who are in school still. I'm just speculating. You know, other kids have a turn who are still in school. I'm just speculating.
No, if we get 10 applicants and the best interview is from someone who's like 17, like, you're hired, not really hired, but
Yeah, let's go back and talk to the staff liaisons a little bit about that and research it. I think you're right. It almost, too, is how we market it. So if we don't market it to youth and students, you know, we really marketed parks and arts, but yeah, let me talk to the staff liaisons a little bit about that, but it's a great point.
Okay, three things. One, I agree with everything that you've said. Excellent work on this. Two, if people are interested in youth involvement, I highly encourage them to get involved with Law Day. That was an excellent experience for me, and Gabby, thanks for setting that all up with help. The third thing is, as we're thinking in the future about additional boards and commissions, I want to be very cognizant of the fact that meeting on a weekday night is very hard for some people. And if we're thinking about broadening the perspectives of information that comes in, whether through advisory body or other boards or ad hoc committees, we need to be cognizant of that. So do we need to offer reimbursement? Do we need to offer childcare? Do we need to offer areas that are compatible throughout the city rather than downtown? Do we need to offer other alternative days, and what's the impact on staff time to do that? So when we're looking to expand the boards and commissions, we also need to be very cognizant of the fact that the fact of convening people is exclusionary. And so how do we make sure that we make it as open and accessible as possible? That's my 2 cents.
I have some questions and some thoughts. But I do want to just start by saying I really appreciate how thoughtful this is, how you are clearly coming into roles that were created, like you were the originators of your roles, and you have lots of opportunity, but only so much bandwidth. And so I think both Gabby and Anand are looking to build into your role what you are capable of, and then also what the potential is for future growth. And I think that's really important to pace yourselves, and I'm glad you're doing that. That said, I am disappointed that we can't run faster than we can walk, but that's life, and I get it. And so I guess with this proposal, I'm kind of thinking, how do we get to the next steps? And how do we support you in going beyond what is recommended in a doable timeframe? And so I'll start with the DEI. as you develop an advisory committee, then I'm guessing that the advisory committee would work its way onto the roadmap because it's not in the roadmap currently. Okay. And then think about like, what is the criteria for, like, how do you know when you're ready to turn it from an ad hoc advisory committee to a standing advisory committee? And like, how do you then bring that back to council to say, you know, we'd like to continue this? I think your point about having it be an advisory committee and not on the public record is smart. I think it might always need to stay that way because we do need to ensure that people can be safe in sharing their experiences, especially when they're hard. And I do worry about people being targeted for their struggles and people trying to like get after them by using the public record. And so that, like, my disappointment is not that it wouldn't be a border commission, it's that it would be ad hoc for now. And I wonder if there's a little bit of semantics of like, it's ad hoc for 2 years and then we're gonna make it permanent when like, or we could just make it permanent and not do it in 2 years from now either if we didn't need to. I'm not sure.
I will say the ad hoc nature at the beginning really allows us to explore what the community is looking for in an advisory body. My hesitancy to move immediately to a permanent body comes from a place of not wanting to convene something that would be set in stone before we even know how often they would like to meet, what they want to do, a scope of work. So like before we can even develop a scope of work for a permanent advisory body, I would hope that we would be able to ask the community in a really in-depth way and with a lot of nuance what they're looking for in that opportunity and how it can be mutually beneficial and how it can make them feel safe and secure and heard and affirmed. And convening an ad hoc first kind of allows us to do that.
Great. And I think that's just a very kind of methodical way of approaching it. And I appreciate that. Because, you know, we change code, like code can be changed, right? But like there is a process that comes every time that needs to happen. And so what you're saying is that I hear is that you're going to do the homework. Like you're going to learn what a functioning advisory body on this topic looks like for our community. And then you would say, let's put this into the code and like make a record of it. Okay. That sounds good to me. Next up is I appreciate Councilmember Dodd's point that our Bothell specific human services agencies don't necessarily have a group that covers the county, that covers both counties and the entire city. NUSA is a great resource, and all Bothell specific human services agencies are invited to participate in those meetings because even NUSA recognizes that including Bothell in NUSA means including Snohomish County Bothell. And so that is a way to convene. But I hear that the proposal here is that those agencies are looking for and are hungry for staff connection and working together with staff. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. And they can't vote on their grants. They can't we can't combine them. We can't mix them. They're gonna if ever there is a future human services board or commission that does vote on grants, that human services group would have to be separate. Just make sure that you keep them separate. And so I think in that kind of methodical approach towards, building your job description as you work on the job, starting with your human services agency group next year makes a lot of sense. However, these recommendations also do not solve for the problem that we brought to you, that council brought, and we thought maybe these commissions could do that, or these topics could do that, but we have so many talented, creative people who want to be involved in our community, and we don't have enough boards and commissions available to them. And so part of that is that we don't want to lose the people we have and the people who show interest. How do we then build opportunities for them to engage? What I'm hearing is it's not DEI right now, and it's not human services right now. Maybe for potentially in the future, but like, what are those opportunities where we can not have to turn so many people away when they apply to our boards and commissions? So yeah, that's one. Let's start there, and then we'll leave youth next. So go ahead. If there's any, I guess those are that. Go ahead if you have any thoughts on that.
I think that's a great point about how to get more people involved. And I think part of our community engagement strategy, we actually have an item to identify all the different ways that people can get involved, whether it's volunteering or all these different avenues. So I think we have a little bit of work to do there. Gosh, that's a good one.
I want to make sure I understand the question. So what I think I'm hearing you say is that so with the proposal for DEI, for example, it does get people involved. But is what you're saying is that when we open it up for board and commission appointments, there's more people than spots, and so they don't get to serve on a board and commission? Is that the issue, or is it involvement? So Becky mentioned things like having a community kind of civics orientation class. Those are opportunities. I do think volunteering may be robust. So there's two things really. One is, how do we get people who want to be more involved civically with their city and community? What are the opportunities the city provides? And it can be a menu of options, or is it specific to board and commissions? And then we get into the whole thing of too is, are there civic opportunities that the city isn't in control of? Whale Scouts being a great example of where people can get involved there. So I'm wanting to make sure that I understand. I like the framing that you proposed of getting to the root cause. What's the problem that we're trying to solve? But I want to make sure that we are understanding, so that as we think about options to come back, we're hitting the right target.
There was a timeline, if I understood you correctly, you had in your opening, there was a timeline aspect to this also. There are a lot of people interested, like right now, but we're not proposing something right now to help solve the problem. Is that?
Yeah, partly. I think what maybe, and I can't speak for my colleagues, but I think there was maybe a theory of change that if we suggest a Human Services Commission and DEI Commission, that then solves for the problem of we need more boards and commission openings for people who apply. And if the recommendation is different from that, that's fine, because you guys have to be able to work at the level that you can in the time frame that you have. And so I guess to your question, City Manager, are there other unexplored, I have 2 points. So are there other unexplored boards and commissions that we have not yet thought of or proposed, so that when we have 50 people applying to boards and commissions, that we can welcome them into an advisory, I'm going to call it an advisory body. Yes, that is accurately, I'm not using, okay. Sorry, I know you're very, you can be very specific about your terms, and I was trying to match your terms. So I think I did. And so are there advisory bodies that they can kind of, already that we do, if your first choice is Planning Commission, Soften Planning Commission, are you interested in others? And so, to have that kind of ranked opportunity to move to openings that exist in other possibly newly formed commissions. And then the other point is, if we have too many people, or if we have so many people applying to our boards and commissions that we have to refer them elsewhere because we don't have enough advisory bodies for them to serve on, we can then point them to, Are you interested in getting involved in this advisory committee? Are you interested in getting involved in this volunteering opportunity? Like, there's that. But I think boards and commissions are marketed in a way that other opportunity, you know, if you have to apply to be told no to get to the opportunity, like, that you don't know about yet, like, then we're not marketing what those other opportunities are. And so I think there's several kind of threads that you could pull on along that, because part of a problem we are trying to solve for is how do we engage our community in such a way that people who want to have a steady, you know, meeting schedule to guide the city can be involved. And, you know, I think the answer is very clear. Right now, it's not DEI. Although, asterisks, because advisory committees are fantastic bodies for providing advice. But it's clearly not human services either right now. So are there other opportunities that we haven't looked at? I think that covers those two.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
And I think one of the things that I heard as a nugget in that too is that similar to on the application where we have what else are you invited or interested in, maybe either in the application or even in the follow-up, could also be pointing people to what are meaningful opportunities. And I know as an example of that, concurrently to our board and commission recruitment process, the Regional Coalition for Affordable Housing, ARCH, was looking for community advisory board members. And so there was a few people who had experience that as being on a board member and on an appointing committee for that, had a real good nexus into what that CAB board looked like and did a referral. And now we have 2 new members from Bothell who are serving on that regional board. So
I hadn't heard that follow-up.
So there's things like
Cool.
that. So yeah, they just got appointed in the last meeting. So there's things like that we can do, and maybe we need to look at like kind of what our formal web is of how do we help people find opportunities to plug in, even if it isn't for a board and commission. I keep thinking back to like our library board, for example, of where really the time on that, it got to the point of where the chair and the library came back and said, we think there's better ways to have people involved and engaged in giving voice to the library. So, just having a board, if there's not a clear purpose, I think we're going to leave people frustrated. But how do we find those distinct opportunities that people might be interested in?
Yeah, I think you make a good point. Like, there are lots of more regional opportunities, and to just have a list of those, like, how did Amanda get involved in snow track before being on council, right? Like, those kinds of opportunities exist, and we as a city, if our boards and commissions are full, we can point them to these other regional opportunities. And I think that might be a solve for that challenge. But also, are there other boards and commissions we haven't yet thought of or considered? So I'd be curious about that. And when it comes to youth, I will share that when I attended NLC, I was able to meet some youth council members who were serving on the youth education and family committee that I'm on. And it was just such an amazing, like, they're very talented young people. It was fantastic to meet them, but also, like, we have equally talented and amazing young people in our community that would benefit from opportunities to be able to attend a national conference. And, like, I don't know, no, there they are. Slide 13. I'd love to hear the story of this group. I don't know their story, but that can be later. But for young people in our district, in our community, to have the opportunity to learn and engage at that level, this was the youth I met were part of an NLC. They were on a council in their city that was then invited to the NLC conference, and they were sitting in a room with 100 other elected officials across the country. Like, I want our kids here to have opportunities like that. And what is being proposed, I think, is a great, like, we can dream all we want, but we can also have to take steps to get to a direction that we want to go in. And the forum is an excellent step in that direction. And I think that what you've proposed here makes a lot of sense. In your description on slide 13, you also said that most of the youth councils that you learned about are associated with teen facilities, programming or volunteering. And so perhaps part of that step is we build a teen center. We're working on it, right? Like we've already done the survey on it. We're trying to figure out, siting on that and funding for it so that can become a reality in our community. And once the facility exists, we might then be able to put together a group that would then have opportunities to engage in like a youth type council. And so, like, yes, my disappointment is that we can't do it all now. And I realize that's just reality. And so I am grateful for the very realistic, thoughtful, and like these are good solves for what we can do now. So I do support what you're talking about, and I also want to encourage us to remember that this is not the final step, and that there are bigger, better directions for us to head in as we continue down this path. So thank you for listening.
I know that we're focused. I talked first. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna go. So I'm sorry-ish. I know we're talking about youth, DEI, and human services. I think one of the other things that I think there was support for exploring amongst everyone is how many positions are on each advisory body that we already have, and whether that fits the state of our city today, right? Like, for how long have we had 7 planning commissioners, and do we need 9? Do we need 30? We don't need 30, but what is the right number? How is that determined? 40. Oh God, we're gonna need a different room. A bigger table. And I also really wanted to enthusiastically second Councilmember Kurt's comment that for the bodies we already have, we are missing people who need childcare, who can't miss work without compensation. And I'm not saying we pay like a minimum wage job, because that might really change what the possibilities are. But childcare at a minimum to both attend any city meeting, or like that was really successful with the comp plan open houses, I think. And I realize that's not an overnight change, but if you are raising young kids, those kids are going to be the beneficiaries of all this long-range planning. And it would be a tragedy if the people who know them best, their parents and caregivers, thank you, because Councilmember Aldrich has reminded me of the right word there.
We're not running funeral homes when we're taking care of our kids.
Yes, yeah. Their parents and caregivers should be able to get that feedback in there, right, and participate in the process, because that's who we're doing this for. Like, I will be retiring somewhere tropical at someday, and it will be my kids' city, right? I'll probably be here forever, but it's important that we don't miss those voices.
And I would just add that, like, one of the silver linings of the pandemic is that it allowed me to get involved in city processes that I thought were inaccessible to me as a parent with young children and kids with disabilities at home. Like, I did not have the bandwidth, resources, tools, community support I needed to get involved until it was online. And so those hybrid options are great, but yes, there are still members of our community who are not able to participate because of their caregiving responsibilities.
I'm looking around to give Amanda a minute.
I believe I am done at this moment.
Sorry, one more thing about the youth that Councilmember Kurd brought up. I do support adding youth opportunities. Stop. Okay. I support adding youth opportunities to our current commissions. And I think that it might be kind of like pulling teeth to say we want 2 youth members on our planning commission, but we are literally building the city that we hope that they can live in someday. And so I would very much like to have, so my suggestion was going to be 2 youth members on the planning commission. I think we have enough budding architects, construction engineers, and builder, like we have enough people involved, or urban planners, kids who want to get, who want to get into that, even preschool teachers and, people who just want to build a city where people want to live. I think those young people do exist. And what if we were to try adding 2 positions? But I think the kind of near-term fix that Councilmember Dodd suggested is a good one too, that if we just change the recommendations, if we could get, kids as young as 15, or we just took the age limit off, could we get kids applying to Planning Commission? But would it be more successful if we had, like we did with parks or arts? So
we did have a youth member indicate interest in parks and planning. Not this, but last time, but the time before that. I've only done 2 times, but, and I think there was a comment that we don't have a youth spot on planning. So as long as we can just clarify what people can apply for, I think that would be helpful. Because I see that you were shaking your head like, do we have a limit?
No, I actually don't think we have I don't think there's an age requirement, but we can double check that. I think it's up to, but Becky made a great point of people aren't going to think of themselves as, it's unlikely that a 14-year-old is going to think, you know what, I'm going to be a planning commissioner. So you kind of have to create the door opener for it. But I don't know that we have an age restriction, but we can look at it. And certainly if there's an interest in adding positions, we can look at, we can bring something back on that too.
And Becky made a good point about just marketing, right? Like when we put the announcements out, what if we just shared it where the kids are going to get the information and then see who responds?
The mayor may get to talk at some point. But I was gonna add too, do we know how we reach people now? Do we ever follow up and say, how did you find out about this? Because I was on the planning commission before I was on council, and I just found out because I started to learn about how our government works and that it, zoning changes hit planning commission before they hit council. And I was like, well, that makes sense. I had no idea they existed, right? But I think the other thing is when we talk about partnerships with schools, if we decide or realize or just say, hey, we're going to recruit more openly with youth, right? Announce it somewhere. There was a leadership class at Skyview. I'm sure there's appropriate classes at the different age ranges. We could all have our kids tell people, but that seems inefficient. But, how we reach people, how we can reach different people seems right in line with a lot of the updates we've had today.
Yeah, Parks did a really great job marketing when they added the youth positions. I think they went to Instagram and ASB and the schools, and they did a really great job with that. So
I heard the youth like Instagram.
Yeah, they do.
Nick is like, I know.
And Nick was our youth ambassador. He knows everyone.
Nick just hopped on his TikTok account and he's like, I'll bring people here. I can't believe what I'm about to say, and I'm glad there's nobody from other departments here that can quote me on this later, but they'll probably find it if they want to anyway. I really appreciate the deliberate pace of this and want to start making sure that we are doing something that is manageable. Because in this specific instance, one of the struggles we've had is that not everybody on our advisory bodies right now feel like they are getting to do meaningful work, the kind of thing that they were expecting to do when they signed up. So I think it's really important with these new advisory bodies that we are setting expectations for our community members who raise their hand to do this that we can meet. And I appreciate that conversation about, I think, predictable expectations. Becky, I think you may have said that as we were talking around the new boards. And as we started this whole conversation about boards and commissions, I don't know where we are in the process. Are there still ongoing conversations happening or coming to us about kind of how we engage with our current boards and commissions?
I think we have a lot of our direction and steps. We're just still putting them in place. I think we know what we need to do. We're just still working on it.
Cool. I want to echo, I think Council Members Kurt and Aldrich said, as we go into budget season, I am absolutely in favor of a child care stipend for parents on boards and commissions. Say what? Well, we don't.
I said in council.
We don't get to make that decision. I like the idea of opening the planning commission up to youth. I don't know that I don't know where I stand on adding youth-specific spots to it, but I do think as we go out, we should make it very explicit that it's open to people of all ages. And we're interested in hearing from people of all ages. The question about the ad hoc DEI advisory committee, would they have their own set of policy issues that they worked on, or would they work on things that also touched other boards and commissions, or like how would that work? Because like the Planning Commission, Parks, everything deals with a lot of issues that committee, I think, could have a lot of value speaking into. So how do we do that?
My understanding would be that body would primarily focus on their own programs, policies, procedures, and plans, and that we would really build out the DEI training and support for the other boards and other boards and commissions so that they feel empowered to bring equity into the work that they do without necessarily consulting like the DEI advisory committee. Because I think there are a lot of opportunities for things to get put onto an advisory committee rather than building capacity in other committees to engage in equity work. So rather than having them consult on all the questions.
But we do think there may be times where there's a particular special project or issue or topic that would be good for the advisory committee to address. And we'll kind of see how that goes. But we do envision that there will be things, because that group will be a very diverse group and it'll be very representative of our community. And so they'll be very valuable. They'll have valuable insight.
So flexible depending on what would best serve the community.
Exactly.
Love it. Sorry. I waited a long time for this.
I just want to.
Go ahead.
Just for an example, like the comprehensive plan might be an example of when like the DEI committee might. It's just, a question as an example.
Last thing, and similar to what Councilmember Aldrich said, and I've heard this, just so you know, this isn't a concern. I've heard this in everything that you've said so far. I just want to make sure this is a first step, not a we check the box. Like, because like clearly we're taking it and we're doing what we can handle right now, but like I would love to see a human services board come online as an example, and I would love to see the DEI board become a permanent board should we go through that process with those people, and that is what we think is best. So looking forward to the next conversation, and I've appreciated this one.
It was actually very helpful. I'm so appreciative. It was really nice. Thank you so much. Super helpful.
Yeah, thanks for listening to us. Appreciate it. We're just volunteering you to do things. Like.
All right, adjourned.
Recording stopped.